Racism and Rice Pudding. London, December 1977. Since the day she was born as the seventh daughter of a woman who longed for a son, Pam had come to see this world as a hotbed of favoritism and inequalities, some of which she accepted as unchangeable, the ways of humans. But never in her life had she been subjected to open hostility for being who she was. Until that day in early December 1977, the day she met him. There was only one client at the Crystal Scissors, the retired librarian, who seemed in no hurry to be anywhere, and Pam asked the owner, Rita, for a break to do some shopping. Eunice had been craving his favorite dessert, rice pudding with orange blossom, and she intended to surprise him that evening. Rita, is okay if I go for 1 hour? Rita was not only her boss but also a dear friend. A tall black woman with a huge bosom, chipped teeth, the biggest afro in town, and a smile as sunny as the summer skies. Rita always used to talk about the place where she had come from, Jamaica. To Pam's ears, the name felt nutty and crunchy, like a roasted cashew. Go, darling, said Rita. I'll take care of the librarian. I bet she wants to tell me all about her holiday in Italy. Pam left the salon feeling light and heavy at the same time. Light, because she had a full hour all for herself. Heavy, because things had not been going well recently. Esma was always sulking, a book in her hand, going through another phase. Iskender was worse. He came home late every evening, and she was worried that he had befriended the wrong kind of people, and her husband. Well, she didn't want to know what exactly he had got himself into this time, disappearing for weeks on end, bringing home smells from another woman, when he did appear. Adem was a sad man. He often talked about his childhood, mentioning the same forlorn memories again and again, unable to let go. It was like one of those snacks that you knew were harmful but you couldn't stop munching on, even when full. Inadvertently, almost without realizing it, he would start to talk about the past. As for Pam, trusting that time, or her prayers, would put things in their place, she carried on without an ounce of protest, reassuring herself that it was all for the best, or would someday turn out to be. To her, the future was a land of promises. She had not been there yet, but she trusted it to be bright and beautiful. It was a place of infinite potential, a mosaic of shifting tiles, now in a seamless order, now in mild disarray, for ever recreating itself. To him, the past was a shrine. Reliable, solid, unchanging, and, above all, enduring. It provided insight into the beginning of everything. It gave him a sense of center, coherence, and continuity. He visited it devotedly and repeatedly, less out of need than out of a sense of duty, as if submitting to a higher will. Whereas Adem was religious about the past, Pam was faithful about the future. Unlike the morning's soft sun, the early afternoon weather had turned nippy and windy. Pam was wearing the buttoned-up gray coat that made her look older, and also like a wartime girl who had to keep careful track of every scant penny, which, in fact, was what she was doing. She did a quick shop at Tesco, buying the ingredients she needed. Just as she was passing by the bakery around the corner, she spotted chocolate eclairs in the window. Not large as thick and filled with whipped cream, but small and glossy, the way she liked them. Though she rarely gave in to temptation, she made a beeline for the eclairs and entered the shop, the bells behind the door jingling merrily. Inside was the baker, a corpulent woman with legs covered with varicose veins and eyebrows so thin as to be almost invisible, chatting fervently with an acquaintance. Meanwhile, her assistant was serving the customers. A skinny man, no older than 20, with beady, blue eyes, inflamed cheeks that pointed to overly sensitive skin and hair cropped so short it was hard to tell its color. His forehead was covered with spots, and his knuckles and arms had several tattoos, including a large swastika. As there was another customer, a well-dressed elderly woman, ahead of her, Pam had to wait. A minute later the bells jingled again, and a middle-aged man walked in, but she barely glanced at him. The old lady was quite picky and had a tendency to change her mind every few seconds. She wanted plain scones, 3, well, maybe 4, but how about some Eccles cakes? No, on second thoughts, she would like the fruit scones, please. The strawberry tarts looked worth considering too, but were they fresh and the pastry crisp, she wondered, because, if so, she might like to get the tarts instead of the scones, which were a bit too everyday. And on it went. Each time she changed her mind, the assistant put the item back onto the tray where it belonged and took the next cake in demand, showed it to her, and waited for her approval. When she finally made up her mind, settling on a half-dozen iced buns, they began discussing how to wrap them. Was it better to put them in a paper bag, which was light and easy, but could get torn on the way, or to place them in a box, which was safer, of course, except harder to carry? Raising his head from behind the glass case, the assistant gave the waiting customers the once-over, focusing on Pam. She didn't notice the bitterness in the young man's stare, but the shopper behind her did. Finally, the old lady left, moving so slowly that even the bells didn't jingle as she opened the door. Now that it was her turn, Pam nodded at the assistant, but he ignored her and went about organizing the pastries. Then he proceeded to arrange the metal trays, taking out the boxes, putting them back. "Excuse me," Pam said, pointing at the chocolate eclairs. "May I have this too, please?" "Wait your turn," the assistant muttered, wiping a pair of tongs. Baffled more by his tone than by what he had said, Pam hesitated for a moment. It was then that the other customer interjected, "It is her turn." It worked. Putting the tongs down, the assistant approached them, his eyes glued on Pam. "So what do you want?" Now Pam had never confronted a racist before, and the idea that someone could hate another person because of their skin color, religion, or class was as alien to her as snow in August. Not that complete strangers had never mistreated or belittled her, but those instances were all due to temporary flare-ups, or so they had seemed, rather than preconceived judgments over which she had no control. She was aware of how different the top racks were from their English neighbors, and yet Turks and Kurds were different from one another too, and some Kurds were completely unlike other Kurds. Even in her tiny village by the Euphrates, every family had another story, and in every family no two children were ever the same. If Allah had wanted to create human beings alike, he surely would have done so. Pam had no idea why he had introduced so much variety into his creation, but she trusted his intentions. Accepting people the way they were born was tantamount to respecting the divine scheme. The truth was, she was quite tolerant when it came to inborn differences. What she couldn't adjust to were the variations introduced afterwards. A punk with hair as spiky as a hedgehog, a teenager with his eyebrows pierced, a singer with tattoos all over his body, or Esma's passion for wearing trousers and braces. These were the things she found hard to digest. Her linear logic put her in a quandary at times. When she met a homosexual person, for instance, she wanted to understand if he had been born that way, or had turned that way over time. If it was God's doing, it was okay. If it was that person's doing, she didn't approve of it. But since, in the end, everything was God's work and his alone, she could not nurse disparaging sentiments against anyone for too long. So when the assistant asked her what she wanted, Pam heard the question but not the tone of scorn underneath it. Dutifully, she answered, "I want this one and that one, please." The assistant stared off into the distance beyond and above her head, as if she were invisible to him. "Don't they have names?" he asked. Thinking that the man had not understood her, Pam approached the pastry trays from the side and pointed again at the eclairs without realizing that the hem of her coat was brushing against the cinnamon rolls. "Hey, don't touch those," the assistant yelled. He picked up one of the rolls and inspected it. "Nah, I can't sell these anymore." "What? Do you see this bit of fluff?" he grumbled. "It's from your coat. You have to buy the whole tray now." "Fluff?" Pam pouted her lips as if the unfamiliar word had left a sour taste in her mouth. No. I don't want the tray." In her confusion she flipped her hands upwards, and one of her shopping bags knocked over a basket with wrought cakes, sending them onto the floor. The assistant shook his head. "Whoa, you're a walking catastrophe." By now the commotion had drawn the owner's attention and she clomped towards them to see what was going on. "This woman here ruined the rolls and spilled the cakes. I told her she has to buy them, but she doesn't get it." Pam's cheeks turned red under the scrutiny of the owner. "I don't think she even speaks English," added the assistant. "I speak," Pam snapped. "Then surely you must have understood what you were told," said the owner, speaking slowly and unnecessarily loudly, as if Pam were deaf. "But he says buy all tray. I don't have much money." Folding his arms across his chest, the assistant remarked, "Then we'll have to ring the police." "No police, why?" Pam was beginning to panic. "Ahem." The customer standing behind coughed theatrically. Now all heads turned towards him, the silent onlooker. "I've been observing your eclair crisis," he said. "And I feel obliged to say a few words. If the law becomes involved, I'll be the sole witness here." "So," said the assistant. "So I'll tell them the other side of the story." "What other side?" "That you've mistreated your customer and you haven't served her properly. You were slow, impolite, uncooperative, difficult, even aggressive." Now, gentlemen," said the owner, a placatory smile hovering over her lips as she realized the situation was getting out of control. "Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. There's no harm done. No need to go to the police." Quietly, as if through water, Pam turned towards the other customer. Really seeing him, for the first time. He was wearing a sepia corduroy jacket with leather elbow patches over a beige turtleneck sweater. He had a long face, a prominent nose and light brown hair that had a golden tint in the light and was receding at the sides. His eyes were kind, though a bit tired. They were the color of stormy weather, gray and intense behind a pair of glasses that made him look like a university professor, or so she thought. The assistant, too, was inspecting him, albeit resentfully. He hissed, "Well, how can I help you, then?" "First the lady," the customer said. "You haven't helped her yet." Asterisk. They left the bakery together, strangers united by happenstance. It seemed natural that they should walk together for a few minutes, reliving the experience, renewing their camaraderie. He insisted on carrying her bags. And that, too, seemed all right, though she would have never allowed it had they been in her neighborhood. They walked until they reached the nearby playground, which was empty. Perhaps because of the blustery weather. By now the wind was so strong that here and there the leaves came whipping down as if caught in a whirlpool. However, for the first time since she had arrived in England, Pem thought there was something enchanting about the weather. Beyond the wind and the rain and the clouds, there loomed a kind of serenity she had got used to and come to love without realizing it. She grew pensive. He was watching her out of the corner of his eye, noting how her face was free of cosmetics, and her hair, which had blown free of its headscarf, was the color of autumn, bright chestnut with reddish streaks that were so subtle even she might not be aware of their presence. He found her full lips and single dimple very attractive, but kept his thoughts to himself. Nature's lottery was bizarre. This woman, if she were to dress differently and carry herself differently, would turn many heads on the street. Yet perhaps it was better that her beauty was half concealed. That boy was mad, Pem said, still thinking about what had transpired in the pastry shop. He was not mad, the man objected. He was a racist. She paused, taken aback. Racists were people who didn't like the blacks, those who were against Rita. I'm not black, she said. He laughed at the joke. And when he realized she wasn't joking, he stared at her in wonder. You don't have to be black for a racist to take against you. There are many kinds of racism, though they're all the same, if you ask me. She listened, trying to wade through his accent, which was quite different from anything she had heard since she arrived. There are whites who hate blacks, he went on helpfully. Then there are whites who hate browns. To make matters more complicated, some blacks hate browns and some browns hate blacks, not to mention those self-hating blacks, browns and whites, and the blacks, browns and whites who basically hate everybody. Then there's religion, of course, the big divide. Some Muslims hate all Jews, and some Jews hate all Muslims. Oh, and there are some Christians who hate them all. But why hate, she asked. More than the question, it was the way in which it was asked, the sheer simplicity and innocence of it, almost childlike, that startled him. She was completely earnest, he noticed. Rising unemployment, poverty, xenophobia, ideological clashes, the oil crisis. At that moment none of these was a sufficient answer to a question so plain and basic. And he, a veteran skeptic, a dedicated disbeliever, an all-time pessimist, a man who didn't trust the news or the newspapers and took everything with a pinch of salt, including his own truths, and harbored no hopes about humanity's future, repeated, as if through a distant echo, that's so true. But why hate? Later on, neither of them would remember who had come up with the idea to sit in the playground. Pem told him, in her broken English, that she worked at a hairdresser's and had taken a short break to buy ingredients for a rice pudding. She hadn't been able to find hazelnuts, she said, like the ones she used back in Istanbul, and would have to make do with almonds instead. To her surprise, he listened sympathetically. She had never thought a man, any man, would show so much interest in cooking. So you're Turkish, he asked. It didn't occur to her to say she was Kurdish, for it never did. It always took her some time to reveal her Kurdishness, like an afterthought. So she nodded. Lokumku geldi hanım, lebilbilirim var, asterisk, he said in a sing-song voice. She looked at him, her eyes wide with incomprehension. To her amazement, he laughed and said, I'm afraid that's about it. I only know a few words. But how? My grandmother was Greek, he said. She was from Istanbul. She Taught me 1 or 2 words. Oh, she loved that city. He didn't tell her that his grandmother had left Istanbul at the time of the late Ottoman Empire, married off to a Levantine merchant, and that, till the day she passed away, she had missed her neighbors and her home by the Bosporus. Instead, he tried to recall more words common to Turkish and Greek: Kasakasiki, Avanakavanakis, Ispanakspanaki, Siftatelli. Siftatelli. His accent made her giggle, which she did by lowering her head and closing her mouth, the one universal gesture repeated by people who were uncomfortable with either their teeth or their happiness. He observed her for what felt like a long moment, and said, "I don't even know your name." Pem brushed a few strands of hair out of her eyes, and, though she rarely mentioned her multiple names together, and never translated them into English, heard herself say, "Pem Cater." It means pink destiny. He didn't arch his eyebrows or chuckle the way she expected him to do. Instead, he stared at her as if she had just revealed the saddest secret. He then said, "Your name is poetry." Now Pem knew the word poetry in English. Yes, she did. She smiled. She smiled for the first time in a long while. Opening the bag from the bakery, she took out the chocolate eclairs, offered one to him and kept the other for herself. He, in turn, shared his fruit loaf. They ate, at first in silence, then with tentative words, such as if, "Perhaps, I'm not sure but..." Slowly, they spun a conversation around an exchange that had started with racism and rice pudding. His name was Elias. Like her, it had been almost 8 years since he had come to London. He liked the city, and had no problem with feeling like a foreigner because that is what he was in his heart, a stranger everywhere. As she listened to him, Pam wished several times that her English was better. But you didn't need to be fluent in a language to be able to speak it, did you? With her husband, they spoke the same language, and yet they rarely communicated any longer, if they ever had. "So you Greek?" she asked. She didn't tell him what her brother-in-law Tarek thought about the Greeks, or all the negatives she had heard about them. "Well, not exactly. I'm a quarter Greek, a quarter Lebanese, a quarter Iranian, and a quarter Canadian." "But how?" "Well, you see, my grandmother married a Lebanese and my mother was born. Then she met my father. His parents were Canadian citizens originally from Tehran. I was born in Beirut myself but raised in Montreal, and now I'm a Londoner. So, what does that make me? So many journeys, so many ruptures and fresh starts in unfamiliar places." Wasn't he frightened of bearing this much uncertainty around him? Pam recalled how she had dreamed of becoming a sailor, traveling to faraway ports in 7 continents, but that was long ago. As if reading her doubts, he smiled and said, "Hey, it's not that bad. Some people are from everywhere." He tore his gaze from the wedding ring that he had suddenly noticed. She, however, had not realized that there was a faint mark where his wedding ring used to be, the shadow of a wife who wasn't there anymore, but who had not yet fully vanished. "You work?" she asked. "Yup, I'm a chef." At this, her face lit up. "Really?" "Yes," he said. "I bet I can make rice pudding just as good as you do." Pam imagined him dicing onions or poking at some courgettes in a frying pan. The idea was so odd that she let out a giggle, and almost at once she grew quiet, worried about hurting his feelings. The men she knew would barely enter the kitchen to get a glass of water for themselves, which, now that she thought about it, was also how she had been raising her 2 sons. Especially Iskender. "Your wife lucky," she said. "My wife and I are separated," Elias said, gesturing with his hands as if breaking a piece of bread. Deftly, Pem veered the conversation into another direction. What did your father say? He said it's okay you cook? It was a bizarre question, and yet it was the right question. His father had not spoken to Elias for years, he explained, his voice rising and falling. Though later on in life they had made their peace. He said his interest in cooking had started when, as a boy, he was looking for things to raise his sister Cleo's spirits. Your sister was sick, she asked. No, she was special. He said the children in the neighborhood had another word for it. Retarded. Born with severe Down syndrome, she was physically and mentally disabled. While he went to a local school where he was in a class of gifted children, Cleo had to travel a long distance every day to attend a special institution outside town. She was often grumpy, stressed, throwing her toys around, pulling out her hair, eating soil. The only thing that soothed her, young Elias discovered, was good food. A freshly baked apple pie put a smile on her face, helping her to become her dear old self again. And so, little by little, he learned to prepare delicacies for Cleo. In time he realized it wasn't so much that he was helping his sister but that she was helping him to follow his heart. When you needed bread, the earth seeped into your veins, solid and strong. When you grilled meat, the spirit of the animal spoke to you, and you had to learn to respect it. When you cleaned fish, you heard the gush of the water where it once swam, and you had to marinate it tenderly, so as to wash off the memory of the river from its fins. Pam listened, mesmerized, missing many words, but, to her surprise, understanding him. Asterisk. Oh goodness. I have to go, Pam said, jumping to her feet, only now grasping how much time had gone by. Shall I help you with your bags back to the hairdresser's? No, no, she said firmly. I'll be fine. It flashed into her mind that one of the passers-by might see them together and tell someone else. People would gossip, and from there the word would reach her family's ears. She understood, with a plunging heart, that there was no way she could see this man again. Unaware of her thoughts, he produced a card out of his pocket. Elias Stefanos Robert Grogan. Chef. She looked at the words, surprised to see he had so many names, like the countries in his background. On the back of the card was the name of the restaurant. If you come in the evenings, I won't be able to leave the kitchen. Lunchtimes are no good either. But should you stop by after 4 o'clock, I'd be most happy to show you around and cook for you. In return, she gave him nothing. No paper. No address. No promise. He leaned forward to kiss her cheek, which she responded to by pulling back, which confused and embarrassed him, which she was mortified to see. So she gave him her hand, which he missed because he was still thinking about why she hadn't let him kiss her on the cheek. In their mutual confusion, he ended up brushing her wrist and she patted his shoulder. The awkwardness of the moment would have made an onlooker laugh, but to them, it was rather discomforting, so they backed away from each other, as if they had touched a live wire, and then as fast as they could they went their separate ways. Beauty and the Beast. London, December 1977. It was Tabiko's birthday. Less than a year before the Toprak's lives went into a tailspin, 7-year-old Eunice was in the squatter's house, deep in the throes of love. Tabiko had turned 20. I'm a typical Sagittarius, Eunice heard her say. Though he had no idea if that was good or bad. Eunice himself was a Leo, but that didn't mean anything to him either. The only thing that mattered was that the age gap between him and Tabiko had grown wider, his prospects of catching up with her now slimmer than ever. So he sat there with a scowl, munching buttered popcorn out of a plastic bowl. He watched the squatters, bright and full of beans, hand gifts to the birthday girl, silver piercings, safety pins, a spiked collar, braided bracelets, a studded belt, ripped fishnet stockings, and a pair of combat boots. There was a patchwork quilt with the words medicinal marijuana embroidered on the edge, several necklaces with signs, a poster of Patti Smith, books, The Shining by Stephen King, South of No North by Charles Bukowski, a police helmet, stolen from a police officer who had momentarily left it on a table at a local cafe, a poster that said boredom is revolutionary, and a black t-shirt with a picture of a punk band, The Damned. Eunice stayed away from the fuss, as he wanted to be the last to give Tabiko her present. There were two reasons for that. First, he hoped to be alone with her, even if for a few minutes. But also he was not sure whether she would like the gift he had chosen, a suspicion that had deepened after seeing the hodgepodge of things the others had given her. Laden with doubts, the boy was still sulking in the corner when the captain walked in, wearing the tightest jeans Eunice had ever seen, a leather jacket that seemed at least 2 sizes too small for him, and biker's boots. He did not bring Tabiko a present. Only a wet kiss and a promise, mine later, babe. For a brief moment and with a sinking heart, Eunice considered doing the same thing. He could get up and stride towards Tabiko in a slow, purposeful fashion, in his gray school trousers and the blue sweater, which Mom had knitted for him, and say, in a tone just as deep and mysterious, mine later, babe. What would Tabiko do then? Would she smile at him the way she had at the captain? Eunice didn't think so. He closed his eyes as he felt the nervousness bubble up in his stomach. His mother always warned him, be careful with girls. Boys are simple, girls are not. They will play you like a saz. Asterisk if that was the case, if Tabiko was playing him like an instrument, the tune coming out of Eunice that day was bleak and melancholy, slightly off-key. Hey, mate, you want a puff? Eunice opened his eyes to see a young man with long, thick dreadlocks lying at his feet. His close-set eyes were glued on an invisible spot in the ceiling, and he was holding a newly lit spliff in his hand. On his arm there was a tattoo, when the rich fight, it is the poor who die. The boy couldn't help thinking to himself that if his mother could see him, she would be appalled. But how do they wash their hair? Pam would ask, and add uneasily, as a new realization came upon her, they do wash their hair, don't they? Now, Eunice had sipped beer before and taken a puff from a discarded dog end, but he had never come anywhere close to doing drugs. It was a highly controversial topic in the squatter's house. There were those Black Panther supporters, radical feminists, Marxists, Trotskyites, who were strictly anti-drugs and looked down upon the people who used them, those hippies and ex-hippies, who favored certain drugs, cannabis, but not others, and then there were those punks, nihilists, situationists, who snubbed weed in favor of pills and chemicals that gave you high energy, high anger. Yet it wasn't the ongoing disagreement in the house that had kept Eunice from drugs all this time. It was the fear of his mother's fury. But now that he had been offered just a puff, the boy didn't see why he should reject it. Politely, he took the joint and inhaled so deeply that he immediately coughed it all out. Did they teach you this song at school? The man in dreadlocks yawned before he began to chant, roll, roll, roll a joint, gently down the line. Eunice giggled and puffed. Have a whiff from my spliff, blow your fucking mind. Eunice puffed and giggled. Between the two of them they made so much noise that they caught the others' attention, including Tabiko's. She walked towards them with a sad and startled look. "Don't do that, darlin'," she said, as she snatched the joint out of the boy's hand and put it between her own lips. "Why are you trying to be like everyone else? You're different. That's what makes you special." At the playfulness of her gaze, the apprehension in her voice, Eunice swallowed hard. Instead of uttering the laconic words he had planned to say earlier, he blurted out, "But I have a present for you." "Is that so?" Tabiko said, faking surprise. "What is it, pet, may I ask?" Eunice stood up, holding his head high and thrusting out his chest, like a soldier ready to take orders. He handed Tabiko the package he had been heaping all evening: gold box, gold tissue, gold ribbon. Inside there was a musical snow globe, pink, purple and perfect. 2 figures, a princess and an ogre, stood in front of a charming castle, holding each other. She was wearing a splendid dress, while the hulky monster stood by her side in a shy, awkward manner. When you wound the key, they began to dance to a tinkling tune that sounded as if an ice cream van was passing nearby. As soon as he saw this and learned it was from a tale, Beauty and the Beast, Eunice recalled that Tabiko was very fond of a David Bowie song with the same title. If she enjoyed that, she might like this too. In truth, Eunice had at first planned to purchase a different snow globe in which flakes of rice rained on a bride and groom as they kissed in front of a church, but then he doubted whether Tabiko would like it. She was against marriage, against religion, and for all he knew she could also be against throwing rice in the air like that. So he chose the other snow globe, even though it was more expensive and drained him of his savings. In his eyes, Tabiko was no different from the princess, gorgeous and flawless, whereas he was a bit like the monster. He was the beast in his elegant costume, leading her on to the dance floor, the unlikely hero in the story, not yet a man but with the potential to become one someday. The boy carried his childhood like a bad spell, hoping against hope for it to be broken soon. The glaring naivety of the object caught Tabiko unprepared. Holding the snow globe in her palms as if it were a baby bird, she glowed with pleasure. "Oh, this is fantastic." Eunice beamed. He was going to marry her. "What is fantastic?" the captain asked from the other side of the room. But Tabiko didn't answer him. Eunice's smile grew wider and wider, so big that it turned into a mantle that canopied the house, hiding the spider webs, the moths circling the candle flames, the termites in the wooden chairs, everything and anything that he wished to make disappear, including all potential rivals. Asterisk. The evening flowed with music from The Clash, the Cockney Rejects and the Sex Pistols, and with a huge chocolate banana hashish birthday cake. There were no candles on the cake to blow out, but the brass and pewter lanterns nicked from a shop the same day provided the celebratory air needed. By now Eunice had had more than a few sips of beer and several slices of the dubious cake. His head wasn't exactly swimming, but his stomach certainly was. Doing his best not to vomit, he sat back, his gaze panning the walls. There, in the flickering light, he noticed a picture he'd not seen before. A man with hefty shoulders, a protruding nose, salt and pepper beard and hair in need of combing. Since it was Tabiko's birthday, he assumed the man must have something to do with her. "Is that your grandfather?" he asked, pointing at the photograph. Before Tabiko could make out what he was talking about, let alone answer him, the man with the dreadlocks overheard the question and turned to the others, yelling mirthfully, "Hey, the boy is asking if Karl Marx is her granddad." There followed a ripple of laughter. "He's everyone's granddad. Someone remarked gleefully. And our granddad will change the world, the captain said, clearly amused. Realizing he had said something stupid, Eunice blushed up to his ears. Yet he had to stand up to the captain. So he asked, isn't he a bit too old for that? He's old and wise, came the answer. And he's fat too, Eunice insisted. This elicited another collective chuckle, but the captain turned serious. His eyes suddenly narrowed to slits. Shouldn't you be a bit more respectful, my friend? That man was on your side. He fought for the rights of people like you. Was he Turkish? Eunice asked despite himself. The squatters laughed so hard, one of them fell off the sofa. Wiping the tears from their eyes, still chuckling, they listened, hungry for more. People like you means the have-nots, explained the captain. What is a have-not? Eunice asked. The have-nots are the people who have been denied the right to have, so that the haves can have more than they should have. Eunice stood biting his bottom lip, frowning. No other species on Earth is as arrogant and cruel and greedy as humans, went on the captain. The entire capitalist economy is built on the systematic exploitation of the have-nots by the haves. You, me, our little friend here, and his family, we are the commoners. The salt of the earth. The great unwashed. My mother is always cleaning the house, said Eunice, this being the only objection he could think of to the last comment. They laughed, but it was different this time. There was a gentler edge to their laughter, a mixture of pity and sympathy. Carried away by his own righteousness, the captain, however, failed to notice that the mood among his audience had changed. Wake up to the truth, lad, he said. People like your parents are being exploited all the time so that others can fill their pockets. Stifling a gasp, Eunice leaped to his feet, a bit unsteadily. My parents are not exploited and we are not unwashed. My brother is a boxer. It wasn't only pride that made him talk this way. Eunice had never thought of his family as poor. True, his mother sometimes complained about making ends meet. But at home no one referred to himself as needy, deprived, low class or, for that matter, as a have-not. Nobody laughed this time. Outside, the night darkened. Somewhere not that far away, under a faint light from the street lamps, Pam was waiting in the kitchen by the window, sick with worry about where her younger son was, her body cloaked in thick silence and solitude, like a figurine in a snow globe. Hey, I didn't mean to offend you, the captain said and chortled, so that his next words would not be taken as a reproach. I suppose you're too young. Summed up in those last few words was everything Eunice absolutely hated: his age, his incompatibility, the impossibility of love. He eased himself into a chair, depressed. Don't mind him, Tabika whispered. It's getting late. You should probably go. Right, I'd better leave, Eunice conceded, his face set in a frown, his stomach feeling funny again. Good night, babe. Eunice waved them goodbye, not by putting his right hand on his heart the way his father and uncle had taught him, but by raising his first and second fingers in a V sign, the way the squatters did. No sooner had he taken a step than the room began to spin. The lights dimmed into a soft, pearly glow and he slipped into some other realm. Without warning and in front of everyone present, the boy puked not on the floor but on the birthday dress of the woman he loved. Oh, no, he whined before closing his eyes, acutely aware that now she would never love him. That night the squatters carried Eunice home. They rang the doorbell and ran away seconds before a devastated Pem opened the door and found her son happily snoring on the threshold. A Fluffy Cardigan. London, December 18, 1977. Since the start of the term, Katie Evans had had a crush on Iskender, almost. Despite herself. Alex. Alexander. Whatever. Complete arsehole. Bloody full. Of himself. Always with his groupies, thinks he's a gang leader. But he was. A bit of a hunk, she had to admit, with his light olive complexion and those smoldering eyes. Finally, she summoned the courage to ask him if he would like to go out with her, to which Iskender replied with a curt, "Okay." He said. On Sunday he had to help his mother in the morning and had boxing practice. From 11 to 2. He was free to meet her afterwards, if she so wanted. Hours before the appointment, Katie was in her room trying on one garment after another, sulking in front of the mirror. The mohair jumpers in colors so soft, the fuchsia, peach, lavender, seafoam, that she had bought with her mother seemed ridiculously tacky. So were the Laura Ashley skirts, the A-line dresses, and Mary Jane shoes. She saw her wardrobe through Iskender's eyes and was appalled at how prim and girly everything was. After much frustration and fumbling, she settled on a casual look. A pair of jeans, plimsolls, and a navy blue sweatshirt. She combed her hair into a ponytail and applied only a little makeup, hoping that he would take her style as a sign of self-confidence or modesty, or, better yet, both. Katie arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early, having checked her outfit in every shop window along the way. 40 minutes later, Iskender still hadn't shown up. Too proud to accept defeat just yet, she called the waiter and asked for another Coke. Initially, she had wanted to order a milkshake. Strawberry and banana, her favorite. But upon second thought she had changed her mind, thinking it could be girlish. Katie's second Coke was almost gone, as was her patience, when the door was thrust open and Iskender marched in, chewing gum and shouldering a gym bag, his hair still wet from the shower. She could see he had taken his time, combing his hair just so, in no rush for their meeting. "How are you doin', love?" he said. And that word, that simple, silly word love, propelled her fury out the window. A flush of color crept into her cheeks. "Been waiting long?" "That's all right." His dark eyes took her in, inspecting her hair, her lips, the baggy top that hid the shape of her breasts. Why had she not dressed up more, he wondered. "How did the boxing go?" "Blindin'," Iskender said. "My coach is fab. Tough as nails. He's an ex-para, fought in Northern Ireland. This guy has seen some pretty horrific stuff." "Did he ever use a gun?" Iskender scoffed. "Did he ever use a gun? He must have killed at least 10. Suffered wounds in beatings and blasts. This bloke learned boxing the hard way." Katie paled ever so slightly. Suddenly she was glad she wasn't wearing one of her fluffy jumpers. "So, what are you havin'?" Iskender asked, pointing to her empty glass. "I've had 2 Cokes. Wanna join me?" "Nah, I hate Coke," Iskender said. "It makes me feel bloated. There's something dodgy about that secret bubbly formula. I like milkshakes better." Not a single muscle on Katie's face moved as she watched Iskender call the waiter and order 2 drinks, another Coke for her, and a milkshake for him, banana and strawberry. They nattered on about school and the kids who never washed, the teachers they couldn't stand. She was starting to enjoy herself when his face fell, suddenly grim. "Katie, what are you doing here? With me?" Her gaze flickered for a moment before settling on him again. Could she confessed to him that she had spent the night before cuddling her tape recorder in bed, listening, over and over, to the Bee Gees sing How Deep Is Your Love? Well, we're just chatting. Look, don't get me wrong. I think you're gorgeous, really, but we don't match, you and I. We both know that. I mean, I'm not the right bloke for you. My world is different. She chewed her bottom lip, on the verge of crying, as if something precious were being stolen from her. And because he rejected her so openly. Because he thought they were incompatible, because he was so unreachable. Winning his heart suddenly became the most important goal in her life. But you don't know me at all, she said, treading a line between affection and confrontation. Oi, I didn't mean to upset you, Iskender said, not looking sorry at all. It was a lovely surprise to see stuck-up Katie Evans so insecure and fragile. And, he now suspected, sweet on him. Tell you what? We got off to a bit of a bad start. Why don't we try again? He leaned forward and held her hand. Hello, how do you do? My name is Iskender. You can call me Alex. Her lips slightly parted as she said, nice to meet you. Before they left the place, Iskender excused himself to visit the toilet. Halfway down the staircase he ran into a young scrawny man with a shaved head, beady blue eyes and spots all over his face. The man, who worked as an assistant at a local bakery, studied Iskender for a fleeting moment, a subtle spark behind his tight smile. When Iskender entered the toilet there was a black man at the urinals, and he sashayed to a stall, whistling a cheery tune. He closed the door and paused, startled by what he saw. There, on the surface of the door, was a 2-foot-high swastika and next to it a number of racist slogans and obscenities. Underneath, it said white power. Some of the words had been scratched on the surface with a metal object, while the rest had been hastily sprayed. Iskender checked the painting. Whoever had done this, it hadn't been too long since he was around. He quickly left the stall and nodded at the man, who was now washing his hands, looking intimidated. As he clambered back to Katie, he so wished he had been there a minute ago, while the perpetrator was still around. Asterisk. They took a walk, which came as a relief to Katie, who had consumed 3 Cokes. Strolling without purpose, they passed by greengrocers, chemists and betting shops, the last of the sun trailing them. Though it was a blustery day and the sky was a bleak mantle, there were many people out and about, doing their business. In Victoria Park they stood by the pond, watching the pigeons. The grass felt good beneath their weight, fresh and promising. He put his arm around her, pulling her close, kissed her. She liked the smell of him, the taste of his lips, and she liked that he didn't try to fumble under her clothes to cup her breasts, the way other boys did, in hopes of going further. She noticed the zeal in his voice, the dare in his eyes, the hunger in his soul. They held hands, and sat on a bench and watched the pedestrians, whispering into each other's ears a frivolous remark about every single person who went past. Bonkers. Old trout. Mugger. A few people smiled at them, happy to see another young couple in love. Others averted their gaze. How about the bloke over there, said Katie. Doesn't he look a bit dodgy? Iskender's eyes followed hers until he saw a lean, dark-haired man approaching them. Immediately, his back stiffened, his arms around her loosened. What? Do you know him? Wordlessly, Iskender turned his back to the road and pulled up his collar. Better to hide his face. The man, whom everybody called the Orator, strode by a few seconds later without so much as a glance at the couple on the bench. "What's going on? Is he someone you don't want to see?" Katie asked. "He's quite all right. But I'd rather he didn't see me with you." Katie was intrigued by the way Iskender closed up like a steel trap. Whenever he was asked a question he didn't want to answer, including queries about his family and childhood, there were sides to him that she couldn't grasp. He was a cool bloke, she thought, but prone to outbursts of fury. When they met the next time, and she knew there would be a next time, he would treat her better. Of this, she was certain. Miracles. London, December 24, 1977. In a spacious, well-lit kitchen full of cooks and assistants, Elias, the owner and head chef of Cleo's, slouched over a massive range cooker upon which various pans sizzled away. Slowly, he stirred a thick, creamy mushroom sauce. It was almost ready, but not yet perfect. He always included a pinch of nutmeg before taking the pan off the heat. That was his little secret. And today everything had to be just right. It was, after all, Christmas Eve. An Orthodox Christian by birth, an agnostic by choice, he loved the spirit of Christmas, the singing, the family get-togethers, the sharing, the giving, but especially the belief in miracles. That was the part he could relate to the best. As a boy, his favorite saint had been Saint Andrew of Crete, not because the saint was far more pious and virtuous than the others, but because, unlike many of them, he himself was a walking miracle. Saint Andrew had been mute from birth, and remained so until the day when, only 7, he suddenly started to speak of truths too immense for his age. Young Elias had loved this story, taking an impish pleasure in imagining the shock on the faces of the people around the child when he uttered his first words. He rejoiced in the fact that the saint had gone down in history as a good orator as well as a hymnographer. If a mute boy could do that, life might perhaps not be as dismal as it sometimes seemed. After putting the nutmeg into the pan, Elias gave the sauce one more stir and turned off the burner. His sous chef appeared beside him and carefully emptied the sauce into a porcelain container, where it would cool before being poured onto 55 servings of beef fillet steak. Elias checked his watch before starting to work on the next dish, spiced pear cake with maple pecan sauce. He never used metal utensils while preparing any of his recipes. That was another one of his secrets. Everything had to be wood. Metal was cold, polished and too perfect. It didn't connect. It only controlled. Whereas wood was clumsy and rough but sincere. It was only 7 hours until Christmas. And, as far as counting went, 1978 was only days away. Elias didn't have great expectations for the coming year. Well, only one. That it would not be as dreadful as the one coming to an end. Those 12 months had been the toughest in his 5 decades of life. Elias had started the year with his career on the rise, an attractive wife, a spacious house in Islington, and more business than he could handle at the restaurant. At the end of 7 months, he was single and living in a tiny flat with barely any furniture. Aside from a few friends, he hardly socialized any more, reeling from the toll of a divorce for which he hadn't been prepared. Emotionally, he likened his state to a model train whose batteries had run out while climbing up a hill. Throughout the last phase of his marriage, he had kept trying, pushing and faltering with an energy he no longer possessed, until he had swerved off the rails. The divorce had been ugly, neither of them acting like their usual selves. He had often found himself debating financial issues more than emotional ones, until finally he let go of her, the alimony. The memories. He had loved his wife, and in some ways he still did. With her lean figure, narrow shoulders, pale complexion, crisply British accent and scintillating ideas, Annabel was the reason he had moved to this country. Since she was more English than the Queen and umbilically attached to her family in Gloucestershire, and since his job was more flexible than hers. She was the founder of a pioneering women's legal center, it had seemed natural that, after a brief honeymoon on Ibiza, they should settle in London. While Elias had not objected to this plan at any stage, the move had not proved easy. London in the early 70s was far from a culinary paradise. There were only a handful of first-class restaurants, and new approaches to food, let alone cross-cultural cuisine, were regarded with undisguised suspicion. Indian cuisine was relatively popular, but its flavors were unlike the ones Elias wanted to introduce. Overall, he found English cuisine heavy and insular, and the customers resistant to fresh tastes, all of which he intended to address. In the end, their marriage finished exactly the way it had started, with a sense of urgency and a need to challenge. Once the divorce papers were signed, all that was left for Elias from 7.5 years of married life was an aged, lazy Persian cat called Magnolia, albums with photos he no longer wanted to see, and the bitterness in his memory and, at times, his dreams. At midsummer, he received a phone call from his mother informing him that his father had suffered a second heart attack and, this time, not survived. Elias had been unaware of the first. "He talked about you every day," she said. "Your pa respected you and what you've done over there. He was too proud to say it to your face." The line was so poor Elias could not be sure he was hearing her correctly. "I'm coming home, Ma." "Not now, dear," she said. "You'll come to see me and Cleo when you're better and when I'm better. Right now, we're of no help to each other. Stay where you are and do what you need to do. Your pa would have preferred that." But even without her words, Elias knew he had already decided not to abandon London. He would work and work, devouring his past as hungrily, as tenaciously, as a caterpillar eats away every leaf in eyesight, and then he would wait for someone to pull him out of this cocoon, miraculously transformed. The only thing that remained unscathed throughout 1977 had been his business. The restaurant was thriving, he was planning to open a second one in Richmond, as if to compensate for all the chaos elsewhere. By now Elias had got used to the pain. It had started as a tightening in his stomach and moved up into his ribcage, nestling in his chest, making it hard to laugh, sometimes even to breathe. His friends kept ringing, pressing him to start seeing people again. They left messages on his answering machine, arranged blind dates for him with women who either worshipped or despised themselves. The truth was, more and more so lately, Elias found himself looking for excuses to be alone. Loneliness, that dull feeling he had dreaded almost all his life, had now become palpable and physical, almost like a liquid. It rushed into his pores, drenching every blood vessel and tissue in his body, water penetrating a dry sponge. Strangely, he didn't find it that bad. Pink Destiny, that's what she said her name was. Elias couldn't help noticing how vastly different she and Annabel were. If his ex-wife had met Pam, she would smile knowingly, finding her simple and unsophisticated. "Wasn't this what all men wished for deep in their hearts?" she would say. An uncomplicated woman, someone who wouldn't question, nag, confront or criticize them. Even so, Annabel would add, it was a false fantasy, for there was no such thing as an uncomplicated woman. There were only those who were openly complicated and those who hid it. Despite Annabelle's needling at the back of his mind, Elias had been thinking about Pem. At first he had hoped she would visit him, and they would talk about the things they liked, perhaps even cook for each other. A friendly exchange. Nothing else. He had taken extra care with his appearance, but as the weeks passed, that hope had been replaced by the awareness that she would not come. Why should she? In all probability he had been living in his head for so long that his grip on what was real or possible had slipped. Working soothed him, as it had always done. Tonight, in addition to the Christmas traffic in the restaurant, they would be catering 2 prestigious events. The entire staff had been running full steam ahead, and he was glad that no one had had the chance to ask him why he had included a last-minute item on the menu: rice pudding with orange blossom. Half an hour later, while the steaks were still being marinated in a zesty sauce, one of the new assistants approached. "Chef, you have a visitor." Elias raised his eyebrows, surfacing from his thoughts. Someone is asking for you." Later, Elias said. "I can't even take a leak now." As Elias watched the assistant shrug and turn back, a doubt crept in. "Wait a sec. It's not a woman with auburn hair? What exactly is auburn hair, chef? Is it?" "Never mind," Elias muttered, deciding to go to check for himself. Years after that Christmas Eve, Elias would remember that moment. How he had marched out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, and halted as soon as he saw her, standing in the foyer, smoothing down her skirt. Beneath her knees, as if she suddenly found it too short, a burgundy handbag. Tucked under her arm, a shadow of guilt on her face, still not believing she had gone there. They sat at a table in the empty restaurant, which felt odd, while the team kept running around, which felt even odder. Every few minutes one of the assistants came to ask something, and each time Elias answered with a mixture of anxiety and calm. "You go to kitchen," Pem said after a while. No, don't worry. I have plenty of time," Elias lied. Resolutely, she shook her head. "You go, but can I come too?" "You sure?" he asked. "It's a hen house in there, with a hungry fox on the loose. Only 2 hours before dinner, they're all acting a little mad." She smiled, impervious. The hairdressers had been closed today, and since her family didn't celebrate Christmas, she said, she had time on her hands. Besides, she liked hen houses. Still hesitating, Elias led her into the kitchen, where everyone was too busy to gawk at her. He gave her a uniform, and then, upon her request, gave her peppers to dice, parsley to chop, ginger to peel, and so on. Without a word, without a break, she worked. Later, when the time came for Pem to leave, Elias walked her to the door. They stood under a painting in which a chalky white, naked woman stared at them with indifferent eyes, a reproduction of Ingres Grande. Odalisque. For different reasons, they both felt uneasy, averting their gazes from the painting, from each other. "I owe you one," he said, and when he realized she didn't understand, he added, "Thank you." "I thank you," she said. "You helped other day." So fearful was he of saying or doing something wrong, of eschewing cultural norms, that he extended his hand for a firm shake. Ignoring the gesture, she approached and kissed him gently on the cheek. Shrewsbury Prison, 1991. "This afternoon I went to see Officer Andrew McLaughlin to get my sister's postcard back, as he knew I would. He makes me wait for 30 minutes, and it isn't because he has other business to attend to, but because he wants me to remember. Who's the boss? Also waiting to see him is a new arrival, a fish out of water. Nervously shaking his leg, clutching some papers, he's here to file a complaint. One look at this bloke and you can see he's wet. Behind the ears, untested, untried, unhurt. Don't be daft, I want to tell him. Save your breath. It's never a brilliant idea to snitch in prison, especially not in the first weeks, when everybody is watching you like vultures, and you don't yet know who is who. There are some big toes you don't dare step on, and, if you do, you'd better brace yourself. There is a board on the wall across from me with posters and flyers about organ donation, methadone replacement therapy, a group for the friends and families of prisoners, hepatitis B and C, and the Samaritan's Prisoners Support Program. To a free man, all of this might suggest the sorrows of life inside. But that's not how I look at it. After more than 10 years bird, it is the external world that I dread. I was 8 and Esma was almost 7 when we came to England, and saw from the top of a red bus the Queen's chiming clock. That's what we called Big Ben. We learned the language fast, unlike our parents, particularly Mum. It wasn't the grammar that she didn't get. It's just that she didn't trust English in general. Not that she was more comfortable with Turkish, or even her native Kurdish. Words caused trouble, she believed. They made people misunderstand one another. Nor did she trust those who depended on jargon, such as journalists, lawyers, or writers. Mum liked songs, lullabies, recipes, and prayer, where the words, if they mattered at all, were only secondary. At home, with us children, my mother spoke a Turkish that was peppered with Kurdish words. We answered her in English and spoke only English amongst ourselves. I always suspected she understood more than she revealed. Perhaps all immigrants shrink from a new language to some extent. Take the brick-thick Oxford English Dictionary and show a new arrival a couple of pages, ask about a few entries. Especially idioms and metaphors, they're the worst. Imagine trying to crack the meaning of kicking the bucket. You learned the verb to kick and you know what a damn bucket is, but no matter how hard you try, it just doesn't sink in. Rhetoric is a bit like red tape. It makes you feel small, vulnerable. My sister was different. Esma loved language. Duck to water. If someone used an expression she wasn't familiar with, she'd do anything to make it hers, like a collector who's found a rare coin. She adored words, their sounds, their hidden meanings. Mum was worried that her eyesight and her options for marriage would be ruined because of too much reading. As for me, I had no time for books. I had better luck with the slang, to me that had power. Currency. That is, until the day I started to stammer. I've changed here. Not overnight, but inch by inch. While I'm not exactly a trusted inmate, Martin gave me the privilege to use the library after hours. I read, research, and reflect, the 3 big R's that can make life in prison a step closer to hell or heaven, depending on how you see it. You'd imagine that everyone would hate a bloke like me. Only, strangely, it isn't the case. I receive letters, cards, and gifts from places that are only dots on the map. There are boys who think I'm a hero. They don't have a clue about my life, but still. There are women who want to marry me and cure me with their love. Sick in the head. That is. Then there are the godbotherers who want to work on me. They come from all religions and no particular religion at all. I seem to have A quite broad appeal. Once in a while I even get some of that new age. Bollocks. They send me leaflets, booklets, tapes. Let us help your injured soul by shedding the light upon your darkest hours. Pompous words. They pretend their message is for all humanity but are ready to burn at the stake anyone who doesn't go along with them. Still, they feel affection for the likes of me. They just can't get enough of us. So strong is their desire to correct sinners and score points in God's eyes. We're their tickets to heaven. We, the scumbags of the earth, the wicked, the fallen. A journalist came to see me once, thin as a stick, but well dressed. Short skirts, long sexy legs and all that. She visited me a few times. Seemed to be on my side. Please rest assured, Alex, I only want to understand the story and increase awareness in society by writing about it. How noble is that? Then she goes and pens the shittiest article I was mucked around with as a child. It was all Mum's fault, as the elder son, I had been spoiled by her. This is a typical case of Middle Eastern patriarchal tradition, blah blah blah. I was so irritated I never spoke to a journalist again. They're not really interested in the truth. All they want to do is to fit you into the story that's already in their minds. There were also reports written, even a thesis at some university in London. And once there was this politician who used me as an example to smear all Muslim immigrants. This man is a prototype of the kind of immigrant who is clearly incompatible with the basic tenets of European civilization, he said. To all these people, I'm invisible. So is my mother. We're just a means of furthering their own ends. The door to the office opens and Officer McLaughlin's head pops out. Well, who do we have here? He moves aside and lets me in. The office has changed considerably. When Martin was here this was a different place, but then Martin was a different man. We all respected him. McLaughlin sits at his desk and opens a file. My file, obviously. I see you were born in 1962, he says. You and I are the same age, born in the same month. Can you believe it? Eunice is a Leo, Esma is a Virgo, I'm a Scorpio. And so is Officer McLaughlin. They say there are two different types of Scorpios, did you know? That, he goes on. Those who poison others and those who poison themselves. He stares at me, as if wondering whether I'm going to be the anomaly who falls into both categories. Here it says you were repeatedly put in solitary confinement. You got into too many fights. What a shit stirrer. Let's see, you broken inmate's nose, attacked a probation officer. Oh, you smashed another inmate's fingers. 4 of them, he pauses, taking the measure of me. Ouch, that must have hurt. My stomach clenches. How did you do that, Alex? Did you put his fingers on a hard surface and break them all at once, or did you twist them one by one? I know what he's doing. He's reminding me of who I was, and still can be. My life here consists of 2 phases. At first, I was a pain in everyone's neck. There is no other way to put it. I was full of rage, resentment, totally lost. Then there was the second stage, which is more or less where I am today. Still angry and mad, but more at myself than at those around me. I crushed his hand with a concrete block, I say. Right, McLaughlin says, nodding as if he is appreciative. And the officer? What happened there? I had a small beef with him. He asked for it. Pushed me hard to see how much he could get away with. Trying to make me bend over during strip search, calling me names, provoking me. I hid a razor in my toothbrush and slashed half his face. Later on he was sent to another jail. I hear the scar hasn't healed. It says you've had seizures, epileptic fits, migraines, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, psychoses, suicide attempts. He stops. He's found something of interest. Speech impediment. Now what's that? I stuttered, I answer. For a while. It's gone, though not fully. When I get nervous I still trip over my tongue, but I'm not going to give him the pleasure of knowing that. McLaughlin goes back to reading. Heavily medicated. Trazodone. Zimelidine, lithium, Paxil, Valium, Xanax. Some had no effect at all, others seemed to work for a while, and some had so many side effects I ended up worse than before. Lithium made me gain weight. Zimelidine caused a nausea so intense that I felt on the verge of vomiting my lungs out, and once trazodone gave me a painful erection that didn't disappear for 3 days. I wonder if all that is in my file or if he's broken into my medical records, and if so, whether that is legal. Suddenly he sniggers at something he's read, his shoulders hopping. Oh, you don't eat meat? I nod. Another laugh. Sorry, I can't help it. It's just that for a bully like you. I mean someone who's murdered his mother and has a systematic record of violence, it seems odd to worry about a few animals. When I fail to comment, an awkward silence falls over us. May I take my postcard now? Sure, he says, suddenly serious. As soon as you tell me why you made your mate hit you, you can have your bloody postcard back. He was about to lose it big time. His wife asked for a divorce. He needed to hit someone. And you, the Good Samaritan, offered your chest, is that so? He opens a drawer and takes out Esma's postcard. To my surprise, he doesn't play around but hands it right to me. Then he says, there are cuckoos who think Houdini died because of the blows to his stomach area. They claim one of the punches ripped his appendix. I don't say anything. No need to tell him I might be one of those cuckoos. If you hit the appendix repeatedly and with enough force, you might get a result. It's a matter of finding the right angle. At least, it's worth a try. What do I have to lose? I'm experimenting with death. Alex, I have enough evidence to suggest that you were trying to meet your maker. That is, if you're a scorpion who has a tendency to poison himself. He's smarter than I thought. But I'm going to deny it all the same. Why would I want to kill myself? I'll soon be a free man. That is when Officer McLaughlin leans over his desk, looks me in the eye and utters the only right thing he's ever said. Alex, you and I both know you'll never be a free man. Even after you've been sprung. From here, even when you're out there on the streets, you'll still be locked up in your guilt. Then he sits back. Just so that you know, Houdini's death had nothing to do with the blows he received. His appendix was already kaput. Why are you telling me all this? 'Cause it's a wise sailor who makes for port when a storm is coming. What if there is no storm? I say, standing on my feet. And you're making for port for nothing and missing the sunshine? It's a mistake, I know. I shouldn't be talking like that. But my ego is awake, if it had ever been asleep at all. Sit, McLaughlin says. I do. We wait in silence. A full minute goes by. You may leave now, McLaughlin says. As I head to the door, I hear him mutter, as if to himself, why did you people come to England and bring us all your crap? In Britain, the dislike of foreigners always catches me off guard. They don't always call you spick or greasy wop to your face, although there is that from time to time. Racism is not part of daily life, as it is in some other countries I hear about. It is subtle and always polished. It is not about your skin color or your religion, really. It is about how civilized you are. I walk back to my cell, greeting a few of the lads on the way. They are mostly local Englishmen under this roof, but there are also a few Hispanics, Russians, Bulgarians, Arabs, Africans. In every nation, there are good eggs and bad eggs. That's my take. Some of the men have heads scrambled from drugs and fights. Mine might be quite mashed too. There's a lot of that, drugs. Some lags are only after getting wasted or getting into one another's pants. The poofs. It's harsh on them. When I first came here, I didn't like any of the gangs and decided to form my own. It wasn't easy, but I pulled it off. We had strict unwritten rules that everyone obeyed. No tolerance for pedophiles and rapists. No fruits, diddlers, sickos among us. No smackies, no poppers, no snort. Suddenly, I couldn't front it anymore. I was their leader, but I left the gang because I had issues to resolve inside my head. I was heavily sedated to prevent me from harming myself. On suicide watch. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For a long time I just sank even lower than where I had been. Then one night, my mother came to me. Her ghost. An apparition. Whatever you call it. I could smell her hair. It was that real. She stayed with me the entire night. Her face. Her eyes. I sobbed like never before. After that, I began to change and I'm a different man today. Maybe not better, but different. And that's a piece of information Officer McLaughlin will never find in my file. Asterisk. When I enter the cell, Trippy is sitting on his bunk under several blankets, his face ashen, his eyes closed. He seems totally spaced out. How did it go? He asks. Brilliant. We didn't strangle each other. Sweet, he says and goes back to his stupor. He's been popping more and more pills since he got the news about the impending divorce. For a moment I want to tell him to take it easy. But I can see that all he wants is to be left alone. I respect that. I go and lie down on my bunk, brooding. There is a bridge in the other world, thinner than a strand of hair, and more slippery than an eel. When the day of judgment arrives, every person will have to cross it alone. You'll hear the screams of the sinners as their skins are scorched and their bones boiled. If you're a sinner yourself, you'll fall into the blistering flames underneath. If you've done enough good in life, the animals you've sacrificed on Eid will wake from death and lead you safely to the other side. Who taught me this? It must have been Uncle Tariq, but I'm not sure. I was 7 years old when I stopped eating meat. Each Eid we would ask God's forgiveness for not being able to sacrifice an animal. The neighbors brought us meat, which was nice. But in our last year in Istanbul, Mum urged Father to buy a ram, and not just any ram, but a big one. We were going to England after all. Dad had found a job in a factory over there. God had opened a new door for us and we duly had to thank him. Father kept complaining about how expensive and unnecessary all this was. Still, one morning I woke up to a bleating coming from the garden, and there was a ram grazing on thin grass. It was an impressive animal, with scarlet ribbons tied to its horns. They let me feed it and give it water. Mum and I applied henna on its post, which left scarlet patches. I spent the next 2 days by its side. It was my first and only pet. Uncle Tarek said, "Don't get too fond of that ram." "Why?" I asked. He frowned. "Didn't they tell you? It'll be slaughtered soon." Crying, I ran to Father. He seemed in a jolly mood and promised not to touch the animal. "I have only one son," Father said. "I'll let you have the ram." God, I was over the moon. I felt proud to be a boy, not a weedy girl like Esma. The next day they sent me on errands, and when I came back there was the ram's bloated body hanging from the tree. I couldn't tell what hurt more, the death of my pet or my father's lie. Learning that Mum had been an accomplice? Or that I wasn't as favored as I had thought? Mum put a smear of ram's blood on my forehead, kissed me, said I looked like a sultan, and went to cook the meat. A pungent, sticky smell covered the house. In the evening, when they put the dish in front of me, I refused to eat it. "Do you know how much that ram cost me?" Father asked. "Do you have any idea, you ungrateful brat?" At the time, I didn't what came over me, but I do now. The anger. The adrenaline. The sensation of falling and rising at the same time. It hits you like a wave. Next thing you know, you're standing on a crest and you can dare anyone, even your own father. I pushed the plate aside more harshly than I had intended. The food spilled all over the table. Father blinked, not believing his eyes. Was I challenging his authority? In front of my mother and sister? He went berserk. I had never seen him so enraged. "Iskender, eat," he shouted. "I don't beat my children." Then I shrugged. That was the last straw. He pushed my head towards the puddle of meat. It was so unexpected that my chin hit the bottom of the plate and bounced back like a rubber ball. But my nose was still swimming in broth, heavy, oily, mixed with my tears and my snot. I heard a slurp. It was coming from me. And that taste I have never forgotten. The taste of my weakness. Father kept pushing his fingers tight around my neck. I chewed and chewed, lifting my head for air between gulps. Finally, he let me go. When I looked up, I saw he was ashamed of his reaction. He wasn't an abusive man, not in that way. I don't know what took possession of him that day. I don't think he knows either. Mum ran to me, wiping my face. "My lion, my sultan. Are you all right?" I ignored my mother's hand on my forehead and glared at my father. Now there was resentment in his eyes, but also a flash of misery. What were we doing to ourselves? Why were we always taking it out on each other? Then and there I understood it was no good shaking in your shoes. If I displayed weakness, he would step on me. The whole bloody world would step on me. But if I were strong, really strong, no one could. Since then I have never been weak. At fault, yes. Entirely wrong. But not weak. Never. And since then I have not eaten meat. Iskender Toprak. The Moustache. London, January 1, 1978. 5:40 in the morning, and Adem was already awake. Lately he had begun to set the alarm clock at ungodly hours so that he could have some time to himself before Roxana woke. He liked to watch her while she was sleeping. Her face looked different then, less strained, no longer angry at him for who he was and what he couldn't become. Now, stripped of its peach-colored lipstick, her mouth was smaller, without a hint of coldness, her hair spread out on the pillow like spun wool, pointing in all directions, clutching around his heart. Being in love with Roxana was like watching a boat pass by in the distance. Adem sat on the shore stock still, shielding his eyes from the sun. Under his gaze the ship kept moving. Not too fast, never in a hurry, an almost imperceptible farewell. He knew their days together were numbered. She was slipping away from him inch by inch, and the only thing he could do was to wait until she became a dot on the horizon. When she discovered that he had no money left, she would be done with him. He was aware of all this because she had made it clear from the start. A woman has needs, she was fond of saying. Roxana was always astoundingly, agonizingly forthright. She had seen him lose at roulette, but she still believed he had money up his sleeve, savings in the bank, a loan that would be paid back, or property in London. Surely he must have something. He has been in this country for so long. She expected Adem to reveal his hidden treasure any day now. Her expectations hadn't come out of thin air. He had done everything in his power to give her that impression. The truth was, however, that a few days ago Adem had lost his job in the factory. His sloppiness had finally taken its toll. Now his only source of income was the money he had borrowed from friends, his only asset, the house where his family lived. He had been given a mortgage 6 years ago and had so far paid off only a quarter of it. Sighing, Roxana turned in her sleep. Her face twisted, her nostrils slightly flared. "No," she said, and mumbled something incomprehensible. Then again, she repeated, "No, no." Adem held his breath, trying to hear more. He wondered what she was dreaming about. Her body was here in bed with him, but her soul was far away with another man. If so, was it someone she loved? He didn't know. Which would be worse, that she had never been in love and was incapable of opening her heart, or that she had loved once and would never dedicate herself to anyone in the same way again. Quietly, he got up from the bed. The blanket slid aside, revealing Roxana's bare thighs. She could sleep naked, winter or summer, utterly comfortable in her skin. He could never do that. Each time, he would take off his pajamas before sex and instantly put them back on afterwards. "Take your socks off in bed. You're like an old man," Roxana complained. He obeyed, though he didn't like it because he was always cold. The heating in the flat was poor. Old pipes in need of repair, leaking in places. But he dared not complain about it. Another thing Roxana didn't like was his mustache. "Englishmen don't have them," she often said. "When you gonna cut it? It makes you look like Stalin." Shuffling his feet in the dark, Adem went to the kitchen and turned on the light. The mess surprised him, even though he thought he had got used to it by now. Roxana hated housework and often reprimanded him for not giving her a hand. "You can't make me serve you. I'm not your wife, am I?" She liked to say such things, insinuations as sharp as broken glass. Her bitterness was an inseparable part of her, almost vindictive. It wasn't really The harshness of her comments that he minded so much as the generalities she projected onto him. Every time Roxana lectured him, Adem had the impression that she was addressing all the men she had known. That hurt. Being part of a rogues gallery, having no distinctive character in her eyes, made him feel like the temporary lover that he was. He wanted to be unique, her one and only. It didn't matter that there had been others before him. Well, it did matter, but at least if he could be assured that he was special, it would lessen the discomfort. Roxana would laugh at such a thought. I never said I was in love with you, did I? Whenever he came close to talking about his feelings, something he had never done before, neither with his wife nor his children, she would wave her hand, as though to disperse some cigarette smoke that was bothering her. Adem opened the cupboard, trying not to look at the sink, where a stack of dirty plates and mugs caked in mold swam in murky water. Managing to find a clean pot, he started to make Turkish coffee. On the back burner on low heat, the coffee started to simmer, its slow boil strangely soothing. The kitchen was suffused with a pungent smell. Soon, he sat at the table with a cup in his hand and drank it down in a few gulps. Still, he didn't feel fully awake. Still, he carried the night in him. The day before he had gone to his younger son's school and waited outside, hiding in the shadows. Like a criminal, he thought to himself. When Eunice walked out with his friends, he had not called his name, his throat too tight. Similarly, a few times he had hung around a cafe called Aladdin's Cave, in the hope of running into Iskender. Once he had spotted him in the distance, holding hands with a lean, blonde girl. He knew Iskender had an English girlfriend, but seeing them together, light and full of zest, had made him feel old, revealing the vigor he no longer possessed. In the months he hadn't been to the house, his son had grown up so much. He was a young man, quite handsome. Much as he wanted to, he could not go and speak to him. People were looking. That was the hardest part. Meeting the eyes of friends and neighbors, making small talk all the while pretending not to notice what was on their minds. A shameful man who abandoned his family for a dancer. Striding across the hall, he went to the bathroom, turned on the light and observed himself in the mirror. He frowned at his sunken eyes, the marks on his cheeks from old spots, the white streaks in his hair. How could his hair become hoary while his mustache was still black? He was going to trim his stubble, the way he had every morning for over 15 years. But his right hand seemed to have another plan. With a sudden urge, he grabbed the razor. When Adem came out of the bathroom, clean-shaven, he saw Roxana sitting up in bed, leafing through a women's magazine. He had only to glance at her to know that she had slept poorly and was not in the best mood. "Do you have coffee for me?" she said, without looking up. "Sure." His voice sounded vaguely different when talking to her, like an echo of his own. "My neck hurts again." He began to massage her neck, drawing widening circles above her shoulders, his hands settling momentarily on the small of her back. She let out a moan, her body relaxing as if in a foamy bath. He kept massaging, with more strength, until his fingertips met around her neck, accidentally at first. Then with a purpose. It occurred to him, and not for the first time, that he could kill this woman. He said, "I'll go make your coffee." "Wait." She studied him intently. "What have you done to your face?" "Oh, my mustache," he said. "Do you like it?" Even though Roxana nodded, she wished suddenly, and without quite knowing why, that he hadn't shaved it off, that he didn't love her this much. And that everything could be different. A sad smile settled into the corner of her mouth, and all the bitterness seemed to bleed away from her. Silent surprise. London, January 2, 1978. Early in the afternoon, a golden glow illuminated the windows of the Crystal. Scissors, where a bunch of Christmas decorations hung like ripe grapes, bathing the interior in a glittering light. Still reeling from a party the previous night, Rita was drinking her third cup of black coffee when the door opened, and a middle-aged man walked in. His face was animated and bright, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that could have been distancing, were it not for his warm smile. Raising an eyebrow, Rita examined the stranger from head to toe. He didn't look like a representative for one of the shampoo companies or a petitioner trying to collect a few more signatures. Nor did he have the air of an inspector who had come to check the sanitary conditions at the salon. Well dressed and proper, he seemed a decent man, but one never knew these days. "May I help you?" said Rita. "Yes, please. I'd like to have a haircut." Rita let out a chuckle. "I'm afraid we're not open yet." "Not for another 15 minutes, Anne." "Oh, I can wait outside, no problem. I was gonna say, this isn't a unisex salon. Why don't you try the barber around the corner?" "Ah, I've been there before," said Elias. "That man should call himself a butcher, not a barber." "Well, I'm sure we can find you a good place," Rita conceded, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Just wondering," he said in a sweeter tone, "have you noticed lately how many salons have turned unisex?" "Really?" asked Rita in mock amazement. She hadn't yet ruled out the option that he might be some sort of lunatic. Working in the tiny room at the back, Pem stopped cleaning the hairbrushes and strained to hear who on earth Rita could be talking to. She thought she recognized the voice, but it couldn't possibly be him. Her heart leaping into her throat, she tiptoed into the salon. Such was her astonishment at seeing Elias chatting with her boss that she leaned against the wall, incapable of making another move. Elias hadn't seen Pem enter. "I've kept my hair long for the past 4 years. I feel it's time for a change," he was now saying. I always say to my customers, ladies, long hair is for women. That's the way the good Lord made it." By now Pem was convinced that she had to intervene and shoo him away, but try as she might she couldn't think of a way to do it. Pursing her lips and biting them raw, she continued to watch them. "Then perhaps you'd consider helping me," Elias said. "I'm a chef, you see. Every day a customer complains about hair in his soup." Rita laughed. "I'd love to help, darlin', but I'm waiting for my 12:30 appointment." "I do it," Pem butted in. Both Rita and Elias turned aside and gaped at her, arms slightly akimbo, faces grim, as if they had forgotten who she was. Doing her best to sound casual, Pem added, "I cut his hair." It wouldn't be the first time. Though she had not trained as a hairdresser, Pem had been observing Rita long enough to know the ropes. Cutting the hair of her children, especially of her sons, for many years had also taught her a few tricks. "Well, that's settled, then," Rita said with a dismissive shrug. She was about to add something else, but the door slammed open and her customer popped in. Rita walked towards the woman, her arms wide open. "Margaret. How nice to see you." In the meantime, Pem ushered Elias to a chair at the end of the room, where she whispered tensely, "Why you here?" "Sorry, I had to see you." "No, you don't," she said, sounding like a petulant child. She put a smock around his neck, lined up the scissors on a plastic tray and began to wet his hair with a spray bottle. Elias saw that Pem was so vexed by his presence her hands were shaking. He felt such a strong urge to hold her and to apologize for upsetting her that he had to take a deep breath to control himself. He half regretted his bit of mischief. Nonetheless, the pleasure of having her this close outweighed the guilt. He watched her every move in the oval mirror on the wall. At her touch he closed his eyes, and when he opened them he saw that she, too, was observing him. Her next words, however, did not match the compassion in her stare. "I cut your hair, but don't come more. All right, don't worry. I promise, I won't come here again." Relieved, Pem smiled for the first time. "And how do I cut?" "Now that, I dunno." Elias had always kept his hair the same way and was only now beginning to realize he was not quite ready to change his style. But he said, "Make me handsome, please, something nice." "You're nice already," Pem muttered in a voice so low it was a miracle he heard her. Laughter broke out at the other end of the room. Rita and her customer were gossiping with gusto, engrossed in a world of their own. "I need to ask you something." "What is it?" she replied apprehensively. "Look, I'd like to get to know you better, and spend more time together. But if you'd rather I stay away from you, tell me." Pem flinched. Her face paled a little, and after what seemed an eternity, she mumbled, "Don't stay away." Elias raised his right hand, the hand that was closer to the wall and therefore concealed from all eyes, and caught Pem's right hand. It was the first time they had touched in a way that wasn't accidental, or a shy encounter, beset with guilt and panic. Like a falling man reaching out for a rope, he grabbed her hand and squeezed it so tightly it hurt. She didn't mind. For she felt the same, the intensity, the belatedness, the impossibility. Her hand grew as small as a sparrow in his. They stood like that for another second until she pulled away. "How I cut? Make it like his, please," Elias heard himself say. Pem followed his gaze to the nearby table, on which a magazine was open to a picture of a man at an awards ceremony, an athletic Hollywood star with porcelain teeth and suntanned skin. "Like him?" "No." "Yes." "Sure." She couldn't help the giggle that escaped her. "Absolutely, I've always wanted to look like a celebrity." She took the magazine and studied the photo, even though she knew that he couldn't care less about the actor, that he was only buying time to be close to her. For the next half hour she toiled in silence, her brow furrowed in concentration. No more words were exchanged. Each time Rita stole a look at how they were doing, she saw only Pem working and the strange customer reading one glossy magazine after another. When she was finished, Pem took a mirror and showed him the back of his head. Elias heaved a sigh, trying not to be demoralized by the shortness of his hair and the sight of his nape. As she was taking off his smock, he asked, as if in passing, "Do you like films, Pem?" "What?" "I mean, cinema. Do you like to go?" Pem nodded, smiling. During the early years in England she had asked her children to take her to the cinema several times, which they had done, but language was always a barrier. She had found it difficult to follow the dialogue. "Why you ask?" she said. Now Elias approached, his eyes locked on hers. "I've left something under the hairspray. Take a look at it, please." Then he raised his voice to a merry pitch. "Well, thank you very much. You've done a terrific job." From the other end of the salon Rita beamed, pleased to see another satisfied customer. While she and Elias exchanged pleasantries and he paid, Pem stayed put, her eyes fixed on the can of hairspray. There was a ticket. There, next Friday at 4 p.m. at a cinema in East Finchley. It was an old film. Black and white and silent. Disgrace. London, January 5, 1978. Tarek was the proud owner of a corner shop on Queensbridge Road. 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, he sold sweets, snacks, toiletries, fizzy drinks, frozen food, cigarettes and sundries. He also had a stand where he displayed myriad newspapers and magazines, some of which made him frown each time his eyes slid over them: Mayfair, Men Only, Fiesta, Knave, Penthouse, Club International. There was too much indecency in this country. All this nakedness was no good. He couldn't understand for the life of him how some men found pleasure in these publications, and neither could he comprehend the women who posed in them. Didn't they have families? Fathers, husbands, or brothers? He kept the obscene material at the far end of the rack, under the tins of tuna and condensed milk, where their fans could still find them, but they would not bother innocent eyes. Feeling hungry, Tarek checked the clock on the wall. It was only 11:15. His wife, Meryl, brought him lunch in a tin pail every day at 12:30, kofta with minted yogurt, smoky aubergine puree, rice with garbanzo beans. A samovar would hiss in the background, ready to serve. For during an ordinary day, from morning till late in the night, Tarek guzzled around 30 glasses of tea, which he liked dark and plain, and with a sugar cube that he sucked on each time. While he ate, Meryl would make herself busy mopping the floor, dusting the shelves and polishing the sign in the window that said Oasis Mini Mar. E.T. He intended to fix the K, but he never seemed to have the time to do so. Besides, the customers didn't seem to mind. When the food was finished, Meryl would take the empty pail and head home to finish her chores. Perhaps one day he would ask his wife to help him run the store, but he would never allow her to work in a distant place among strangers, the way Adam let Pam. It just wasn't right. Unless there was a financial crisis, a woman should not have to look for a job. Neither before nor after lunch did Tarek visit the local mosque, like some of the shop owners in the area. He was not a religious man, although those who saw him with his bushy beard and a rosary in his hand tended to assume the contrary. The beard he kept because it suited his face and also hid the pockmarks underneath. And the rosary was more out of habit than piousness. He had a collection of them at home: bright amber, light turquoise, coral, pink, opaque onyx, jade green. Fast and steady, he fingered the beads, filling the shop with a constant clatter, which he didn't notice, over the drone of buses going past or cars screeching to a halt at the lights. Of the three brothers, Tarek was the eldest, and had been the first to leave Istanbul to work abroad. Initially he was employed at a factory that produced machinery in a small town called Troisdorf in Germany. He had found the job taxing, the Germans unreachable and their language impossible. The Germans invited you to their country to work, not to mingle, and expected you to leave as soon as you were no longer needed. Adapting to their ways was like trying to embrace a hedgehog. There might be a secret tenderness, a gentle core underneath, but you couldn't pass the sharp needles to tap into it. The immigrant community could have helped him find his feet to feel less vulnerable, and thereby less resentful, but Tarek had never been skillful at making acquaintances, and the years in Germany were no exception. Once, however, he befriended a Tunisian coworker, and the man had taken him to Grossfreiheit in the red light district in Hamburg. Neon signs, music clubs, peals of laughter in all languages. Tarek was appalled to see women displaying their bodies like mannequins in shop windows. But their aloof expressions, the poise in their stare, were just as disturbing. They were not like the prostitutes in old Turkish films, buffeted and beaten by life. "You like go in?" his friend asked in pidgin German, so he'd understand, pointing to an entryway decorated with blinking bulbs. "What's in there?" A smirk made its way across the man's face. "What's in there?" he repeated in mock horror. "Pussies, man. Blonde pussies." Tarek dropped his eyes, scowling at the stains on his boots. He mumbled, a response so low it went unheard. "I don't want to." His friend gave him a look of disdain. "Up to you, man. If you can't do it, you can't do it." Tarek thought about hitting him, delivering a kick in the shins with his muddy boots, but the urge went away as swiftly as it had come. He watched the man whisk in through the door and out of sight, leaving him in the dimly lit street, where he could now hear a woman singing behind closed windows. The same week at the factory, Tarek learned from other workers that the man was telling everyone about how he had bottled out at the brothel, saying he didn't feel up to it. People sniggered behind his back. Some suggested he could be a queer. Tarek was already planning to get married that same year, but the incident accelerated his plans. When he brought his bride from a town in Anatolia, a third cousin on his father's side, he asked Meryl to visit the factory every day for the first month, so that they could all see he wasn't one of those queers, and shut their mouths. Asterisk. At 12:25 the shop door swung open and Meryl ambled in, her cheeks rosy from the wind. Today's menu was lentil soup, stuffed green peppers and tulumba. Asterisk. She watched him eat for a while, taking pride in his appetite. Then she said, "Pem stopped by this morning." "What does she want?" "She didn't ask directly, but I think they're in need of money." "Money, money, money." Tarek droned. Tarek had once seen a film in which the hero turned into a gangster to save his younger brother from poverty, and to provide him with a better future than the one God had seen fit to give him. In the end, unexpectedly, the younger brother, who had now become a police inspector, arrested the hero. Even though he respected, loved, and admired him, and was indebted to him for life. But their own family story was not one of villains and heroes. Though he had done his best to help his two brothers keep their heads above water, wanting to believe that with some support they could change their destinies. Tarek knew that he was a limited man, and so were Adem and Khalil. His brothers had followed in his footsteps and become immigrant workers, one in Australia, the other in England. After a few years, Tarek quit his job in Germany and went to England, where they said the weather was horrible but the people were polite. Now, as Tarek dunked his bread in his soup, he inquired, "Does Pam know where he is?" "She doesn't have a clue." "But..." Meryl paused as she poured boiling water into the porcelain pot on the samovar. "She knows that he's moved in with another woman." "Well, what do you expect if she's not woman enough to keep her husband home?" Tarek said, leaving the sentence unfinished. Adam should have never married that woman. There were better girls for him, and yet, inexplicably, he had fallen for Pem. Why her, and why so? Suddenly, Tarek had never understood. Not that he didn't see Pem's beauty, but in his eyes this only added to her unreliability. Men were mistaken when they coveted attractive women. They could flirt with them in their bachelor days, but a spouse ought to have attributes other than good looks. From the very beginning he had opposed this marriage. But Adam had been alone in that godforsaken Kurdish village when he asked for Pem's hand. Alone. And terribly young. When their mother ran away with another man, Tarek had been 16. years old, Khalil 13 and Adem only 11. In all the millions of homes in Istanbul, mothers did their very best to keep their families together and children content, and yet their mother, only theirs, had walked out on them. Not everyone would understand this, but their honor was all that some men had in this world. The rich could afford to lose and regain their reputation, buying influence as perfunctorily as ordering a new car or refurnishing their mansions, but for the rest of the world things were different. The less means a man had, the higher was the worth of his honor. The English didn't understand these ancient rules. Their wives could kiss other men, drink and dance with strangers, and they would look on smiling. A man who had been cheated of the honor that was his due was a dead man. You could not walk on the street anymore, unless you got used to staring at the pavement. You could not go to a tea house and play a round of backgammon or watch a football match in the beer house. Your shoulders would droop, your fists would be clenched, your eyes would sink into their cavities, and your entire being would be a listless mass, shrinking more and more with every rumor. No one would pay heed to you when you spoke. Your word would be no more valuable than dried dung. The cigarette you offered would be left unsmoked, the coffee you drank bitter to the end. You would not be invited to weddings, circumcisions, or engagements, lest you bring your ill luck with you. In your own corner and surrounded by disgrace, you would dry up like a desiccated fruit. Tariq knew this firsthand because it had happened to his father. Baba hadn't died of cirrhosis. The alcohol may have sped things along, but in the end it was dishonor that had killed him. Adem and Khalil had been too young to understand this, but Tariq had seen it happen. After Meryl left, Tariq took a quiet moment to think. So far he had seen his brother's condition less as a vice and more as a calamity that had befallen him. Gambling was a sickness, the worst kind. But squandering your money on a dancer, a woman who was no different than the ones who posed in magazines, was worse. He had to have a serious talk with Adem, that is, if he could find him. When a man neglected his home to this extent, the rest of the family might easily go off the rails. To make sure this didn't happen, Tariq would have to keep a close eye on Pem and the kids. They shared the same surname. If one of them was disgraced, shame would attach itself to him as the eldest Toprak. Their honor was his honor. The missing piece. London, January 1978. The Phoenix Cinema had been founded in 1910. A modernist, tiled facade, a short flight of stairs to the foyer, Art Deco auditorium. It had served the nation by showing newsreels and escapist films throughout the war, but luckily remained unscathed by German bombs. Recently, after having been taken over by a small film distributor, the cinema had started to show obscure and art house movies, although Hollywood classics were also occasionally on offer. But its location was so far from the center that it was almost always empty. Today there were only 4 in the audience, a young couple who seemed less interested in the movie than in inventing new kissing techniques, and a man who sat with his flat cap on and looked older than the cinema itself. The 4th was Elias, stiff and anxious, sitting somewhere in the middle, all by himself. It had been several minutes since the film had started, but he still kept glancing at the entrance. She hadn't come. Elias watched the opening scene filled with apprehension. A picture with a smile, and perhaps a tear, it said on the screen. Despite himself, Elias's face softened at the sight of Charlie Chaplin. He had always loved Chaplin. His humor interlaced with sorrow, his infinite humanity, those sad, soup-black eyes. Slowly, he found his tension leaking away and his mind drifting into the story of the kid. After a while, Elias felt a slight movement at the end of the row, but he dared not turn to see who it was. Someone approached him in the dark and sat by his side, quiet as a shadow, his heart thumping behind his ribcage. Elias made out Pem's face, beautiful and radiant, out of the corner of his eye. Her gaze was glued to the screen, her chest rising and falling. "I'm so glad you came," Elias wanted to say. "You know, I was so worried. You were upset with me." But he respected her silence and whispered not a word. Together they focused on the film. Pem watched the kid with wide-open eyes, the look of surprise on her countenance deepening with each scene. When Chaplin found an abandoned baby in a rubbish bin and raised him like his own son, she smiled with appreciation. When the child flung stones at the neighbor's window so that the tramp, disguised as a glazier, could fix them and earn some money, she chuckled. When social services took the boy away, her eyes welled up with tears. And finally, as father and son were reunited, her face lit up with contentment and a trace of something that Elias took to be melancholy. So absorbed did she seem in the film that he felt a twinge of resentment. What a funny thing it was to be jealous of Charlie Chaplin. Elias observed her as she unpinned her hair, and then pinned it back. He caught a whiff of jasmine and rose, a heady, charming mixture. Only minutes before the film came to an end, he found the nerve to reach out for her fingers, feeling like a teenager on his first date. To his relief, she didn't move her hand away. They sat still, two sculptures carved out of the dark, both scared of making a move that would disrupt the tenderness of the moment. When the lights came back on, it took them a few seconds to grow accustomed to real life. Quickly, he took out a notepad and wrote down the name of another cinema in another part of the town. "Next week, same day, same time, will you come?" "Yes," she faltered. Before he'd found a chance to say anything else, Pem leaped to her feet and headed towards the exit, running away from him and everything that had taken place between them, or would have taken place, had they been different people. She held in her palm the name of the place they were to meet next time, grasping it tightly, as if it were the key to a magic world, a key she would use right now were it in her power to decide. And so it began. They started to meet every Friday at the same time, and occasionally on other afternoons. They frequented the Phoenix more than any other place, but they also met at several other cinemas, all far away from their homes, all unpopular. Since the films did not change quickly, they ended up watching The Kid twice. But they also went to The King and I, The Thief of Baghdad, King Kong, The Passion of Joan of Arc, The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Ben-Hur. They viewed all these films not so much as stories from a bygone period, as destinies still unfolding somewhere. Whichever film they went to see, it was always the same. She kept her eyes on the screen while he kept his eyes on her. Elias loved the way her expression altered with every new twist in the plot. He had the impression that he was meeting the numerous women dormant inside her, glimpsing sides of her character that were hidden from everyone, perhaps even from herself. Every so often, she also stared at him in the same way, as if keen to discover the depths of his soul. Elias shuddered, wondering what she really saw there, and whether she thought it was worth loving him. In time he found out more things about her, pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that he would complete only long after she had gone. He came to learn that, despite her name, her favorite color was amethyst. She loved singing old Kurdish love songs and had quite a fine voice. In addition to pork, which she didn't consume for religious reasons. She would never eat shrimps, snails, calamari or cranberries, all of which made her teeth clench, and yet she could suck on slices of lemon all day long. He also found out how young she was, though the way she dressed and carried herself made her look older. She was, in fact, 16 years his junior. Slowly he was beginning to make sense of the situation. This unfathomable, almost enigmatic attraction that he felt for her, a woman so alien to the life he had led, was like a childhood memory coming back. For a reason unbeknownst to his conscious mind, but not to his heart, he felt the need to love and to protect her against the whole wide world. He'd had a taste of this emotion with the 3 women in his life, his sister, his mother, and his ex-wife. Yet what he felt for Pem was different from anything he had known before. She was his gateway to a world that, though more ambiguous and dangerous, also felt more real. It disturbed him enormously that it was an illicit love, but the possibility of losing her at any moment only added to his aching desire for her. She was the missing link in his life, the connection to his past, his ancestors, his eastern side. Her love was one that made up for the lost pieces and the lost time. Each time, shortly before the lights in the cinema came back on, they would move away from each other, and then go their separate ways. Thus, they would never be seen together, or so they hoped. She always strode out before him. He would linger behind, pacing inside the cinema, observing the posters on the walls, the litter on the floor, the sweets and the fizzy drinks, still thinking of the film, and of the light in her eyes, trying to get used to the emptiness she had left behind. Shrewsbury Prison, 1991. In the middle of the night I wake with a start. It's dark in the cell except for the sickly yellow light creeping in from the corridor. They are supposed to have a calming effect on our nerves, these bulbs. Some shrink's idea. In fact, they make me want to puke. The bed feels rough, like lying on blocks of cement. But that's not the reason why I've woken up at such an ungodly hour. Something is wrong, I can tell. I hold my breath and listen. The snoring, the farting, the moaning, the rustling, the clenching of teeth from the cells near by. People outside think that a prison is a terribly quiet place. It's not true. But tonight, despite the usual sounds, it feels strangely empty. Something is missing. Or else I'm losing my marbles. My mother used to say that premonitions are God's whispers in a dark forest. From time to time, he would tell us to be careful, not to be friends with someone, not to push open certain doors, though we would never pay attention. But I'm not sure that's what's happening to me right now. A premonition is a sense that something bad is going to happen. What I feel is different. It's the kind of sorrow that hits you after something has already happened, and it's too late. I prop myself up on my elbow and prick up my ears. At first I suspect my mother's ghost has visited me, but I quickly realize she's not around tonight. My heart isn't pounding, which is what happens every time I sense her presence. No weird glow in one corner of the cell either, like freshly fallen snow. No soft rustling, as if from silk curtains. No scent of jasmine and rose. No smells of sesame halva. I'll never forget when that happened for the first time. It freaked me out like hell. She used to visit me more often in the past, then less and less frequently. Lately she doesn't appear at all anymore. I dread that she'll never show up again. It's a stupid thought, but as long as she comes to see me, there's a hope that she might forgive me. At the beginning I was scared out of my wits. I couldn't go to sleep, for fear that she would arrive in the midst of the night and strangle me. It took me a while to learn that ghosts don't do such things. You think they're after revenge, but they only want to understand. So they fix their empty gaze on you and wait for an explanation. They stare into your soul. They don't communicate. They don't ask. At least my mother doesn't. It's like a silent film, except in color. But tonight Mum hasn't dropped round. My alarm bells have nothing to do with her. What is it, then? I exhale. I inhale. Then I hold my breath. I listen, this time more carefully. Suddenly it hits me. Trippy isn't snoring. Nor is he twitching, tossing or talking in his sleep, which he always does, no matter how worn out or high. I get off my bed and approach him. His back is turned towards me. Trippy. No answer. He doesn't move. Patrick, you okay? I don't know why I call him by his real name, which I haven't done in years. But the word pops out. I fling the blanket off him. There is a foul smell. He looks strangely small, as if he has shrunk overnight. I shake him by the shoulders. He doesn't budge. I shake him harder. His feet dangle in a funny, clumsy way, like a broken puppet's. His arms are heavy, even though he is the skinniest bloke I know. Trippy, don't fuck about, mate. Stop it, man. I rack for his pulse. His neck is stiff and cold. Colder than a witch's tit, he would say. There is no heartbeat. I prop his head against my arm and breathe into his mouth. The mouth that kissed his missus and a few other women. The mouth that swore all the time, but also prayed. The mouth that ruined him, but was his saving grace. There is no reaction. I start to laugh. Because it's ridiculous. The angel of death is either blind or has gone senile. Azrael should give up work. Doesn't God see that the henchman isn't doing his job properly? Why do the wrong people always die? I've been teaching Trippy how to use his fists. He was an awful student, slow on the uptake. But it was coming along. I've been making him hit me in the same place, on my abdomen. There are deadlier places on a man's body. Like the head, the neck, the Adam's apple, even the bridge of the nose. But if he hit me there, it would look like a real brawl. Then Trippy would get in trouble. Punching me in the abdomen is less suspicious. Everyone knows I box for fun. With the right force, the abdomen is a fatal target. Internal bleeding. Pronounced dead in a few hours if left untreated. And there is no doubt in my mind that it would be left untreated. Trippy didn't know all this, of course. It would be an accident. An inspector would come and scribble on his notepad. His secretary would type the report and leak it to the press. A tabloid would show interest, honor killer dies in jail. Officer McLaughlin would cut out the clipping and place it in his file. They would talk about me for a while. No one would feel sorrow. Then the case would be dropped. As clean as the plate from which a hungry man eats. Trippy would be off the hook and I would be gone. Free at last. Houdini was just a reminder. Officer McLaughlin says there is no such thing, that it's just a cock and bull story. The magician didn't die of blows, as idiots like me tend to believe. But I don't care whether Houdini really died of this or that. Every time I see his poster I Remember that it's possible to be punched to death. Then again, he reminds me of other things too. Sad things. It was because of Houdini that Uncle Tarek found out about my mother's lover, and so did everyone else, including me. I move Trippy to the side and sit next to him. Something cracks under me. I look to see what it is. I pick it up and start to chuckle. Again. You sad bastard. It's a syringe. When did he do that? Was it a mishap? Was it a golden shot? How is it that I didn't notice a thing? Did he wait until I had gone to sleep? I'm a log. I'm a bloody bag of shit. I sleep like a fat hedgehog in his winter nest. I'm disgusted at myself. I check the bed. The sheet is wet with pee, saliva, and vomit. His body tried to flush out the poison. Then I notice Trippy's left fist, clenched hard, the joints on his fingers like spikes. I force the fingers open. There is a piece of paper. I approach the bars so that I can read it under the light from the corridor. Alex, brother. If you're reading this, it means I've made the cut. You wanted to go before me, didn't you? You prat. You think I didn't know? But I was gonna help you. Honest to God. I was. It's just I couldn't take it no more. Don't get pissed off. I'll wait for you. Whatever that is up there. I'll go and check it out. No more tricks. No more Houdini. You were a good mate. When I see your ma, I'm gonna tell her that. Your friend Trippy. Tears roll down my cheeks. I slap my face. It doesn't help. I pull my hair. With one hand, then with both. Harder. Harder. I can feel the skin give way, the hair rip out. And all this time I'm making this sound like a dog whimpering in the street. A car has hit me and run. My bones are broken. Trippy has run over me. I race to my feet. My head is about to explode. Adrenaline is bringing back a feeling I once knew well, anger. I thought I had left it at the roadside. 2 years ago I put it in a sack, tied it tight up and drowned it like an unwanted kitten. I promised myself to spend the rest of my life trying, at least trying, to be a better man. But so much for trying. It's found me again. It's followed me, sniffing its way back home. And here it is, my old playmate Mr. Anger. Loyal as ever. I pull down the Houdini poster and rip it to pieces. I hurl my bed, sheet and blanket and pillow. I kick the walls, I pound the walls, I pounce upon the walls, I hit my head against the walls. Lights. Footsteps. Hassle. Someone enters the cell. What the hell? Others flock in. They push me to the floor and keep my head down. The lights are turned on. Too much light. My eyes hurt. Is that Officer Andrew McLaughlin towering over me? What's he doing here? Night shift. The man loves his job. They're poking around, checking for Trippy's pulse. They find the syringe. They see the note. One of them starts to read it aloud. Shit. I free myself, catch them unawares. I jump to my feet. Before they know it, I seize the note. Hey! A young screw exclaims, as if I have cheated in a game. And he is pissed off. Officer McLaughlin takes a step forward. Give me that. It's mine. Nothing is yours, you moron. Now give it to me. We stare at each other. Finally, the moment has come. He can show me how much he hates me, and I can show him the feeling is mutual. No more pretending. No more fake attempts to be better men than we are. We are what we are. I put the note in my mouth. "Oh, don't you even think about that," Officer McLaughlin says. "You've watched too many films, huh?" I start to chew. Slowly. No need to hurry. They are all staring at me. "Alex, you are gonna regret this so bad. I am giving you one last chance to save your arse. Stop it." Chew, chew, chew. Never knew paper tasted so chalky. I wonder if Trippy can see me. When we die, do our souls leave our bodies right away and float up to the sky like a hot air balloon? Or do they linger for a while? Did my mother's soul stay around and watch my hand pull out the knife that had stabbed her? I swallow the note. The first punch lands on my chin. I'm totally unprepared. My teeth bang against each other pretty hard. Officer McLaughlin knows where to hit. Not like poor Trippy. The other screws look away. They don't approve of it, I can see. They have wives, children, good citizens. They want to sleep peacefully at night. Nobody wants blood on their hands. But they don't try to stop him either. Because that's the thing with bullies. Nobody says enough to them. That's why bullies are who they are. And I should know, because I was, and still am, one of them. Asterisk. My mother was a superstitious woman. In our house there were evil eye beads everywhere. She put glass beads in my pockets, in my rucksack. Once I found one sewn into my leather jacket. We never whistled at night, never opened an umbrella indoors or trimmed our fingernails after sunset. Sometimes we wore our underwear inside, out to ward off bad luck. At the dinner table we did not hand each other knives. Mum did everything in her power to protect me from others. But she forgot what was festering in me. Nothing can protect a man from what lies inside. It was several weeks after my circumcision in Istanbul. The wound had healed, and I had started to play in the street again. It must have been autumn. I remember the trees shedding their leaves and the cakes of mud on the roads. There was a canal near our house. We never swam there. The water was fetid, smelly. People threw all sorts of things in it. Cans, bottles, boxes, plastics, leaflets with communist propaganda. Once somebody found a gun on the bank. On that day I was wandering along the canal, thinking about the gun. Who had owned it? A bank robber? Or an assassin? Had the police found him? I must have been completely absorbed in my thoughts. Otherwise I would have noticed them and changed my direction, or hid behind a bush until they had gone. But instead I marched right into them. 3 boys, a few years older than me. Look who's here. Little Red Riding Hood is out for a walk. Iskender, where's your mama? She not with you? I shook my head. She's always calling you my sultan, the first boy said. And all that Kurdish gibberish. The sultan of the slums, he is. The first boy, who was standing in the middle and was obviously their leader, did not join in with the taunts. He was observing me. He looked concerned for me, even embarrassed by his friends' behavior. I wrongly saw it as a sign, took a step towards him. My protector. Is it true you ran away from your circumcision? The leader asked. You climbed a tree? I must have looked appalled. How did they know? Who had told them? Word gets around, he said, as if he had read my mind. So what happened? Were you or were you not circumcised? I was, I said, and heard the weakness in my voice. He says he was, the leader said. But can we trust him? They pushed me to the ground. They pulled down my trousers. I was shouting at the top of my voice. What is this? So small. Like an okra. No wonder he ran from his circumcision. A cut would have cost him a lot. But he hasn't been properly circumcised, said the leader. We should finish the job. Did he have a pocket knife in his hand? Or was my mind playing tricks? I'm still not sure. All I remember is that I pissed myself. Oh, no. The Sultan needs a good wash now, said the leader. They took off my trousers, and pants, and socks, and shoes. Then they threw them all into the canal. Go and fetch them. Or go home. Like this and let everyone see your okra. They left. But I didn't believe they were gone for good. I sat there, hugging my knees, rocking slowly, expecting them to come out from behind the bushes and attack me. I don't know how many hours went by. Darkness fell. It started to drizzle. I didn't mind. My mother emerged from the shadows with 2 neighbors. She must have been looking for me everywhere. How did she know I was by the canal, the only place she had forbidden me to go on my own? She asked me nothing. She wrapped her shawl round me, took me home, washed me, combed my hair and put me into clean pajamas. There, she said. You look like a sultan again. 10 days later I had my own gang. Nothing spectacular. Just the 5 of us. But they were loyal to me to the bone. Gypsy kids nobody wanted to befriend. They were tough. They smoked. They collected everything, bottle caps, aluminium foil, aerosol cans. They didn't give a damn about anything. We beat up 2 of the boys but didn't touch the leader. I wanted to make him sweat, not knowing if or when I would strike. By then I had my first serious quarrel with my father. The ram incident. I had promised myself never to be weak again, and I was keeping my promise. One Sunday morning our doorbell rang. My mother opened it. There was a woman at the door, weeping. She said the day before a gang of boys wearing masks had assaulted her son. They had thrown him into the filthy canal. He would have drowned were it not for a plank that had saved him. He didn't know how to swim. She said. These boys, these gangsters, had forced her son to drink his own pee. She asked, and did not ask, whether my mother knew anything about it, because her son had not given her any names. I heard Mum invite the woman into the kitchen, saying she was so sorry for her son. She offered her tea and a slice of cake. But the woman wanted none. Yesterday was my washing day, Mum said. Iskender helped me take down the curtains and put them back afterwards. So you see, he was with me all day long. In case you were wondering, my son had nothing to do with this. You're sure? Absolutely. After the woman left, my mother walked into the living room, where I was sitting under the window, watching the shoes pass by. I expected her to tell me a thing or two. A slap on the wrist. A pinch on my ear, at least. But she only looked at me long and hard, and I think I saw a trace of pride in her eyes. Then she said, "What would you like to eat for dinner, my sultan?" "Shall I make you lentil soup, the way you like it?" We didn't talk about the boy I had assaulted. Neither then nor later. Iskender Toprak. The Brave Fight. London, March 1978. Even before he arrived at the squat, Yunus knew something was wrong. As he approached the old building, he noticed the windows on all 3 floors were boarded up with cartons, crates and corrugated boxes, some of which displayed anarchist symbols. The day before, the temperatures had dropped to below 0 and now icicles dangled from the gutters like tears. There was a heavy silence in the air, an eerie tranquility. The night of Tabiko's birthday, the night he was carried home by the punks, Yunus had arrived home so late, and in such a state, that Pam, by then crazy with worry and on the verge of ringing round the hospitals, grounded him for several weeks. Every morning she would walk him to school and every afternoon she would pick him up. But today she finally started to work her regular hours at the Crystal Scissors again, and Yunus was once more a free agent. Though he had promised his mother to go home directly after school, and though he never lied, Yunus found himself, almost against his will, pedaling towards the address he knew so well. After parking his bicycle, he lolloped up the narrow path to the house, careful not to slip. To his surprise, he found the entrance locked. In the many times he had been there, he had never seen the door closed, let alone bolted from inside. The squatters always boasted that this was the only dwelling in London that needed no keys, no padlocks, because it was a house after all, and not a prison of private property like all the others. There being no bell, Yunus knocked, first politely, but soon with growing alarm. Several minutes later he was pounding hard. "Leave us alone," somebody shouted from inside. Yunus stopped, stunned. Could it be that the squatters did not want to see him anymore? Was that why they had quarantined themselves? Timidly but steadily, he started thumping again. "Get away from us, you chauvinist," roared someone else. A female voice butted in, "Fuck off. We're gonna fight." Now the boy was horrified. Much as he loved Tabiko, he was not ready to confront a house full of seething squatters. His voice breaking, he shouted, "But it's me, Yunus here. May I please come in?" There was a momentary lull, followed by a ripple of laughter. A few seconds later the door was pushed open a crack. A man stood at the entrance. He resembled Iggy Pop, as shirtless as the singer himself, exposing his bare, hairless chest. When he saw Yunus he beamed and hollered over his shoulder, "False alarm, everyone. Coast is clear. It's the Baron." "Hello," Yunus said. "I was just cycling by and wanted to see how you lot were doing." "Never better. We're getting ready to kick some arse." "Whose arse?" Yunus asked quietly. "Oh, the authorities," Iggy Pop said in a fluster. Authority, it was another one of those adult words Yunus had heard before but never quite understood. Once he had asked Tabiko what it meant, and in her urge to make a wisecrack she had told him, "It is what fathers have in abundance, mothers never have, and boys like you are, by definition, denied until you're old enough." And a wide-eyed Yunus had asked, "You mean it's a mustache?" So when Iggy Pop uttered the same word, the boy had the impression the squatters were getting ready to attack men with mustaches. Shell-shocked and unmoving, he stood there with a look of disbelief on his face. Unaware of the boy's concerns, Iggy Pop poked his head out the door and glanced left and right to make sure there was no suspicious activity on the street. Then he yanked Yunus into the house, closed the door from behind, bolted it with a makeshift wooden bar, which was secured with nails and wire. "What's going on?" Yunus asked, but the man had turned around and was already clomping up the stairs. When the boy reached the second floor, Eunice couldn't believe his eyes. All the squatters were gathered there, some making catapults out of thick rubber, some organizing truncheons, darts and blow tubes, while others were preparing ammunition. Everyone seemed purposeful and intent, working feverishly under a cloud of agitation. The air was laced with the smoke of cigarettes, incense and weed. A pot of tea, or what seemed like it, sat on a small burner, puffing out steam with a low, tired whistle. To Eunice, even the pot was worked up into a frenzy. The captain was standing in the midst of the commotion, issuing commands like a scout leader. It was the utter concentration on his weasel-like face that made the boy suspect there was an order to this chaos. One of the many things that crossed his mind at that moment was to get out of there immediately. But his need to see Tabiko outweighed his discomfort. Where was she? Try as he might, he could not see her anywhere. Eunice approached a punk, a youngish recruit with spiky hair and round glasses that magnified his eyes, whose nickname was Bogart. "Hi there, what are you making?" "Hello, Jonah. You want to give me a hand?" Eunice shrugged. "Okay, what do I need to do?" "Pour this liquid into the bottles, is all." Thus the boy took the plastic funnel and began to fill wine bottles with turpentine, making Molotov cocktails. "These smell funny," Eunice remarked. After a while, "What are you going to do with them?" "Hurl them at the authorities," Bogart piped, matter of fact. Eunice stiffened, a small twitch along his jawline. Why were the squatters so determined to hurl reeking bottles at men with mustaches? And what could he do to spare his father? "Are you going to attack all of the authorities?" he demanded. "Nah. That's impossible. There are so many of them, bloody bastards." "They breed like rats," said Bogart, his prominent Adam's apple bobbing up and down. "Damn them." "I'll be back," Eunice said, as he rose to his feet. He had to do some thinking on his own. In every room he entered, Eunice found a similar uproar. It was no joke. The squatters were getting ready for a war. And then he saw her, Tabiko. She was sitting on a mat alone, her head bowed, eyes shut, deep in meditation. Eunice perched beside her, taking the opportunity to watch her unmistakable profile. Her black hair, her tattoos, her piercings. He tried to fathom how he, young and penniless as he was, could save her from the imminent battle. "Is it you we won?" Tabiko asked in a low, beguiling voice. Eunice felt himself reddening. "How did you know?" "I saw you coming, you twit." Turning aside, she gave him a wink and a peck on the cheek. "My, you look so serious. What's up, sweet? I don't quite get what's going on here." "Oh, it's the council," Tabiko said, her eyes glinting with scorn. "They want to kick us out. Can you believe that? They sent an eviction notice that gave us a week to move out. That was 9 days ago. We're expecting them at any moment, the bastards. But why? So that they can flog this property to fat cats like them." As it dawned on him that this had nothing to do with men who wore mustaches, Eunice felt relieved. Then he strained his ears, as though expecting to hear battering rams, police cars or ambulances surrounding the house. But there was only the wind out there, a sharp, chilly wind. Drawing in a slow breath, the boy inquired, "Where will you go?" "Nobody is going anywhere," Tabiko remarked. "But the house belongs to them, right?" "No, it doesn't. Some houses are everyone's property. If you ask me, all houses ought to be like that." Tabiko straightened her back. and continued in a voice as decided as her gaze. Their plan is to throw us out. And our plan is to fight back, 'cause if you don't fight the system, you are the system. Perhaps they'll change their minds, Eunice offered. God is great. God has another planet just like ours. There's another me there. And another Jonah. They resemble us, but they aren't us, because how could they be when we're down here, right? The boy listened carefully, but the words escaped him, like sand slipping through his fingers. He had never heard anyone question Allah before, and for a reason he could not quite comprehend, he felt saddened. Mum says, God loves us. Love? Tabiko choked, as if the word had stuck in her throat. Love is a fickle thing. Sorry to break the bad news, God has forgotten us. The boy's eyes grew small, then large again. He peered at his hands, mumbling something incomprehensible, as though reciting a prayer. Among the clutter of words and with some delay, Tabiko heard him say, like a distant echo, but I would never do that. I would never forget you. Asterisk. In the next hour the captain drew the plan on a blackboard stolen from a school nearby. Usually he was oddly sluggish, as if sedated, but as soon as he started his tirade he seemed to pulsate with energy. When the police raided the building, he said, they were all going to go up to the loft, where they had stored enough ammunition for a small army. The beds on the first floor and the tables on the second would be turned on their sides to be used as barricades. From behind the lines they would put up a fight so ferocious that the British media would be obliged to come and observe. As journalists sent pictures of resistance from the scene, young people around the world would question the brutality of Hackney Council. In the end, the government, in its attempt to save face, would tell the council to back down, and the squatters would win the day. This is far out, man. This'll be our Paris Commune, said Bogart, a lit joint dangling between his lips as he stood only a foot away from the Molotov cocktails. Well, the commune ended pretty bloodily, warned Iggy Pop. Eunice knew that if the police raided the building at that moment and he was rounded up with the squatters, his mother would probably have a heart attack. He had to get out of there, and he had to do it fast. If this was a war, it wasn't his war. Whatever the authority was, he didn't want to throw bottles and stones at it. Yet, feeling as he did, he still failed to move. Like a kitten in need of warmth, he stayed next to the woman he loved, preparing new ammunition, listening to revolutionary stories, eating hash popcorn and singing Rebel, Rebel. Fortunately for the boy, the clash that he feared did not take place that afternoon. It happened 3 days later, while Eunice was at school. Their preparations had been inadequate, and, though they put up a brave fight, in a matter of hours they were all arrested. Most of the squatters would be released a day or two later, after a thoroughish police check, and an ear-bashing on proper manners and social conduct. The council, meanwhile, was swift to board up the house. The order to gut the house of everything inside wasn't long in coming. The Amber Concubine, a place near the river Euphrates, April 1978. Jamila swirled the pestle inside the mortar, grinding the saffron that was as red as a ruby. These were her last threads, and she didn't know when she would be able to get the next supply. Some other ingredients were also running low. Marjoram, tarragon, silverweed, devil's claw. She would have to make several trips to the mountains, including a visit to the smugglers. Yet, lately she felt less and less like leaving her house, unless there was an emergency or a delivery, which amounted to the same thing, really. All morning she had been in the cellar, working, contemplating. This was her sanctuary, her haven, this dim, dank, 16 by 14 foot underground room with no windows and only a small trapdoor at the top of a set of steps. The entire place was lined with wooden shelves from floor to ceiling. On each shelf were jars, flasks, and bottles of various sizes and colors. Wild herbs, tree barks, fragrant oils, seeds, spices, minerals, snakeskins, animal horns, dried insects, hundreds of ingredients that she used for her potions and ointments. For holes at different angles, narrower than the openings to mole tunnels, ventilated the hushed interior. Nonetheless, a distinct, earthy, pungent smell lingered in the air, although Jamila was no longer able to detect it. If a stranger went down there, however, he would become giddy, overwhelmed by the odor. But that wasn't likely to happen. No one else had ever been there, and no one else would ever be there in the future. Each day, for the past 15 years, Jamila had spent at least a good couple of hours in the cellar, preparing the concoctions that might be requested at a moment's notice with a knock on her door. She was the healer, the virgin midwife who spoke the language of birds, reptiles, and insects. A granddaughter of the Prophet Suleiman. That's what the locals called her. That, too, was one reason why she had managed to survive on her own in the wilderness. They respected, feared, and despised her. As a result, they left her alone. This woman who was no woman, a witch who paced the tightrope between two worlds. When Jamila was in the cellar, she stepped outside of her body, becoming a conduit for an arcane energy that coursed through the universe, healing, mending, multiplying. There she gave birth to her own womb, and the womb expanded to cover the whole of the natural world around her, a cavern of warmth and compassion, in which she happily lost all sense of self. She could never tell whether it was night or day. Not that it mattered. She lived outside of the clock in a cycle of her own. Some days she worked there, from dawn to dusk, preparing age-old recipes, experimenting with new ones. It never felt dull. Tiring, yes, but not boring. Each flower, every mineral, held a divine secret implanted by God. People often missed the clues. They looked at mistletoe and saw a parasitic plant that grew on tree trunks, not the salve for blood circulation that it offered. Trust. That was what Jamila needed to achieve. When life forms trusted you, they yielded their secret. Not right away, but gradually. Then you knew which plant was right to heal which ailment. Everything in the universe, no matter how little or how insignificant, was meant to be an answer to something else. Where there was a problem, there was a solution, and often surprisingly nearby. It was a matter of seeing. Jamila was a seer. She was not interested in traveling to unfamiliar places, meeting strangers, discovering continents beyond the horizon. The world must be full of variety, but human beings were the same everywhere. It was enough watching the gas lamps in the hills below flickering at night. Allah had intended her to serve him by unraveling the secrets of nature, so she believed it was her duty to stay where she was. She knew how to cure numerous illnesses, though there were a great many that were still a mystery. Underneath the long-sleeved, colorful gowns and ornamented vests that she wore, she always donned a shalwar, which helped her mount a horse when it was necessary. Night and day, she had to be ready for anything. The locals had made up many stories about her. They said it must be the jinn who gave her the formulas for the remedies. Others believed she had sneaked into the Kaf mountain, where no human beings were ever welcome. the abode of fairies, nymphs, and sprites. Jamila shook her head in wonder when she heard such tall tales. In a region hungry for heroes, legends, and miracles, they expected her to embody all three. But Jamila knew she could only do what she could. Depending on the means of the person in need, she would haggle for her brews and balms, although often she gave them for free. With the little she earned, she bought additional ingredients. She also prepared poisons, though she would share those with fewer people. Poison was a gift from God, a divine blessing that often went unappreciated. You could see it as a curse or a cure, like almost all things in life. Nature was beyond good and bad. What could heal could make you sick. What could make you sick could heal. Jamila was convinced that the job of a poison maker was no different from that of any other craftsman. Just like an artisan, she was responsible for the quality of her product and not for the way in which people made use of it. She sold poisons for field mice, shrews, rats, cockroaches, and snakes. While she accepted that her products could be deadly, she always concluded that so was meat. Eating too much meat caused gout, an illness that could kill if it went untreated. But nobody stopped buying meat for that reason or went around arresting butchers. Now, with her forehead glistening under the light from an oil lamp, Jamila put the mortar aside and took out a box. Small, square, mother of pearl. In it there was a stone, a most precious one, a diamond as amber as honey, larger than a hazelnut. She held it between her fingers and inspected it. There were folks here in the valley who would slit one another's throats to have a gem this special. Fools. The diamond could never be possessed, only watched over. Every new proprietor was nothing but a temporary stopover on the diamond's extended journey. Jamila understood this and accepted it. The diamond was with her today, but tomorrow it could be elsewhere. In the meantime, Jamila used it to perfect her concoctions. Some stones exuded warmth and inner light, and when she kept them inside a potion for a while, they yielded their soul, smoothing the edges, helping things to blend. She kept several jewels for this purpose, but the diamond was the best. Since time immemorial, the natives of Mesopotamia had called diamonds the tears of gods. They believed they were made of the dust that fell from the stars above or from splinters that broke off from lightning bolts on stormy nights. Jamila had even heard some say that they were the crystallized drops of sweat shed every spring when Mother Earth and Father Sky made love. Wild imagination. People let their thoughts run amok when they came across things over which they had little control, as if by inventing stories they could make sense of all that was painfully confusing, including their brief stay in this world. Compared to a diamond, human life was shorter than a summer rain. At the age of 80, humans were old and frail, but a diamond was still considered an infant. Jamila guessed that between 300 and 400 years must have passed since her stone had been mined, polished, and faceted. Still young, it could live thousands of years, if not more. When it came to greed for diamonds, there wasn't much difference between the affluent and the poor, and really no end to it. He who had no prospect of owning a diamond coveted one. He who already had one yearned for more. Dishonesty, rapacity, and cruelty, even at its young age, this diamond had already seen them all. It had a bloody history, like all rare diamonds. Merchants, wanderers, pilgrims, sailors, soldiers, and spies had betrayed one another just to lay their hands on it. Maids had served there. Ladies with more respect, ladies had loved their husbands more devotedly. And husbands had felt more like a man with it under their roof. Ambiguities. became certainties, flirtations developed into marriages, friends turned into foes, and foes turned into cohorts. Like a shaft of sunlight that reflected off pure white snow, the amber diamond rendered everything around it brighter. In the same way that sunlight seemed brighter when reflected off pure white snow, but it also carried darkness within. Jamila knew that a diamond of this splendor could exile a person from his own soul. It was a gift from a beg, a man who was used to having people of all kinds bow in front of him, spreading terror and respect in equal measure. Jamila had saved his only son's life. Where doctors had seen no hope, she had toiled quietly, doggedly, bringing the boy back from Azrael's kingdom. Inch by inch, like pulling a sleigh out of broken ice. The first time the boy opened his eyes and spoke, the beg wept. Howled, in fact, like most men who were unused to crying did. The beg offered her money. Jamila refused. Gold coins. A parcel of land. A honeybee colony. A silk farm. Each time Jamila shook her head. She was about to walk away when he showed her the diamond. The Amber Concubine, he called it. She was drawn to it. Not to its worth but to the riddles it held inside. It was a stone of secrets, she could tell. They say it is cursed, said the beg. It cannot be purchased, cannot be taken by force. It cannot be stolen. It can only be given from the heart, as a gift. That's how it came to me, and that's how I'm giving it to you. For a split second, Jamila felt as if she and the stone were connected in some deep and mysterious way beyond her understanding. Nonetheless, she declined. But the beg was a smart man. He understood that Jamila had been attracted by the gem and yet also repelled, worrying that if she had it with her, she would never be safe again. Part of the reason she had survived the attacks of thugs and robbers in the valley was because she had nothing worth stealing. The beg did not insist. But the same night he sent the diamond with a trusted messenger. Ever since then Jamila had played host to the Amber Concubine. There were many odd things about human beings. They thought insects were disgusting but felt lucky when a ladybird landed on their fingers. They detested rats but loved squirrels. While they found vultures repulsive, they thought eagles impressive. They despised mosquitoes and flies, but were fond of fireflies. Even though copper and iron were medicinally important, it was gold that they worshipped instead. They took no notice of the stones under their feet but went mad for polished gems. It seemed to Jamila that in everything they did, human beings selected a few favorites to love and simply loathed the rest. Little did they understand that the things they disliked were just as essential for the cycle of life as the things they so treasured. In this world every creature was made to challenge, to change and to complete something else. A water mosquito was no less significant than a firefly, or brass than gold. That is how God, the great jeweler, had designed the universe. A loud, sharp rap brought her attention back to her surroundings. Somebody was pounding on her door above. She jumped to her feet and put the diamond back into the box. How long had it been going on? She clambered up the stairs, her chest heaving. As soon as she lifted the trapdoor that opened into her living room, the clamor hit her like a slap. Open the door. Virgin midwife, where are you? Putting her hands on two sides of the trapdoor, Jamila winched her body onto the upper floor. She closed the lid and pulled the carpet over it. Finally, she grabbed her rifle. Thus prepared, she went to get the door. She was surprised to see the smuggler whose wife she had attended the other day. the father of the 1.5 baby. She was about to ask how the baby was doing when she noticed the man behind him. He was carrying his companion on his back. Trails of blood. Thick, dark. "Jamila." "Sister," said the smuggler. "You must help us." She understood. They had crossed the border into Syria, carrying goods. Tea, tobacco, silk, perhaps drugs. Things had not gone as they were supposed. 2. They had been ambushed. One of them had been shot. They could have left him there, but they hadn't. They had carried him all the way back. But the man had lost too much blood, his soul was already oozing away. She didn't need to take a closer look to know that he was dying. "I'm afraid I can't help," said Jamila. "You need to go to a hospital." The smuggler sucked the ends of his mustache. He didn't look angry or upset, only impatient. "You know we cannot take him there." Then, as if an agreement had been reached, they laid the wounded man on the sofa and left. Before he strode out, the smuggler said, "If he dies, light a fire in your garden. We will see it and come back to bury him." Asterisk. His face was long and angular, his cheekbones high, sullen-shouldered. Gloomy of countenance, he was lanky, lean. Jamila tried to guess his age. He could have been in his late 20s, but he could also have been past 40. With his cheeks drained of all color and his fate creeping through his veins. He could have been of any age and no age at all. She hoisted him up as gently as she could and put a pillow under his head, which felt oddly heavy and light at the same time. He made a throttled sound, muffled and inhuman, as if there were a lump in his chest, another bullet stuck in his throat. A trickle of blood seeped out of his nostril. Jamila had witnessed many hardships before and overcome quite a number of them. But nothing in her life had prepared her for the dread she felt now. It would be kinder to kill him. A horse with a broken leg deserved to die with dignity. For him, a draft of hemlock would be enough. Good old plant. It was astonishing how many people mistook it for fennel and took their last breath without knowing why. The villagers called it Shaitan's breath, but Jamila had a better name for it, purple haze. If only she could make the man swallow the right amount, he would tumble into a lavender slumber, a final dream. Twice in her life she had come close to killing herself, after being brought back to her father by her kidnappers, still a virgin, but forever tainted, and on the day she learned Adam had asked for Pem's hand. Each time, her determination to carry on, her fear of hell or simply the need to see the sun rise the next morning had compelled her to stay alive. Jamila straightened her shoulders, determined not to permit herself to brood, strong as the urge was. She focused on the man's wounds. Deftly, she cut away his clothes, fully stripping him. The thinness of his body almost made her cry, the grime, the vulnerability, the bones sticking out. He had 3 major wounds, one in his leg, one in his shoulder, but it was the third that was critical. Close to the spine. Whoever had shot him had done so from behind. Working the entire afternoon, the patient twice fainting from pain, Jamila took out 2.5 bullets. The third, below his right knee, had shattered. She saw no reason to go too deep. If he survived this hell, he could live with that much. She knew he would never be the same again. Like stones and diamonds, bullets, too, passed their soul into the bodies that they touched. Long after the glow of sunset retreated from the skies, she dozed off in a chair by his side, her neck gone stiff. Tonight, like the night before, there was a bad feeling in her chest, knocking the air out of her. It was his moaning that woke her up, his mouth closing and opening, like a fish out of the sea. She dabbed a handkerchief in water and wet his parched lips. "More, please." "I'm sorry," she said tenderly. "This is all you can have now. I'll give you more later, I promise." He swore at her, slurring the words. His fever was high. He floated in and out of consciousness. She wondered if he was a decent man. Did it matter? Wouldn't she have tried to save him regardless? He must be married, with children. If he died now, would anyone miss him? Slowly, Jamila moved the carpet aside and opened the trapdoor. She had work to do in the cellar, a potion to prepare, this time for herself, something to help her restlessness. She stole a glance at the patient in bed. He wouldn't wake up for several hours. She pulled herself into the opening, and, once she had balanced her weight on the stairs, pulled the lid closed, holding it on her fingertips. There was no way she could put the carpet back, but at least the cover would remain closed. The man, if he woke up, would assume that she had gone out to cut wood. She let go. The lid sat back on its hinges with a thud. Just at that moment, the smuggler opened his eyes. Through his blurred vision he surveyed the hut, his gaze moving from the neatly stacked woodpile to the rifle on the wall, until it finally came to rest on the trapdoor. An impenetrable look came over his features before he drifted back into a painful slumber.